But to start out, the extent of the new Reich. This is, Teddy, what's his last name? Teddy Wilson over at Radical Reports. Radical Reports is just a great Substack newsletter. And he published one last week that had, I think it was Friday, that had just a whole series of links in it to, things that, what's going on right now. And so I went through those links and a few others and came up with, I think, what's a pretty good overview of what's going on in America right now. Keep in mind, most all of this, there are two exceptions, but outside of them, all the rest of this is stuff that has just happened in the last 2 weeks. And it's getting more and more brazen. I mean, this past weekend, there was a group of Nazis who marched through downtown Nashville, complete with swastikas, giant swastika flags, and racist chants. The media treated it like it was just another day. This stuff is getting normalized. Republicans who run Texas are in open defiance of the U.S. Supreme Court and the federal government over the border. That's the most significant challenge to federal authority since 1832 and the nullification crisis. And indeed, it's stirring up new pro-Civil War rhetoric among the racist base of the GOP. Andrew Womack, who's a televangelist and a big Republican supporter, who called COVID a hoax hyped by liberals as an opportunity to come against Trump. Recently, on his podcast, Truth and Liberty, he said, quote, "I've actually had people say that if Trump was to be elected, if we got a conservative Congress, that they fear we would have another civil war. And you know what? I don't want a civil war. I don't know anybody that does, but would it be worth it to turn this nation back? I believe it would be worth it." Right. I was in the middle of a civil war in Uganda in 1980. And in fact, one of my colleagues was shot dead. Her name was Anne. She was an Irish Red Cross worker. I just don't think anybody calling for a civil war has actually ever been in one. Because once you've seen what a civil war is like, you don't want them. Anyhow, Nikki Haley has been swatted twice. She's been physically attacked on stage. She's now being stalked at campaign events by Putin-loving Trump supporters who are outraged that she's calling for more military support for Ukraine. Jacob Ware, the author of Guns, God, and Sedition, told the CBC, quote, "I think intent to commit violence is high across the political spectrum, but especially on the far right." And he talks about our gun laws, facilitating that. Just days after Maine Secretary of State Shayna Bellows ruled that Trump had committed sedition and couldn't be on the state ballot, she was swatted. Judges Tanya Chutkan and Arthur Engoron have been targeted by fascist Trump followers. A Trump devotee armed with a hand at Pelosi's home and tried to do the same again. Another apparent Trump follower just last month murdered and decapitated his own father because he was a federal employee and therefore part of the deep state that Trump said we got to destroy. When the Washington Post looked into this problem of, the Public Religion Research Institute, PRRI, found that fully 23% of Americans agree with the statement, true American patriots may have to resort to violence to save the country. And the Washington Post looked into it and found that people running for Congress had to increase their spending on security by over 500% between the time Trump lost in 2020 and last November's midterms. The Brennan Center for Justice questioned 1,700 state and local elected officials in all 50 states and found that fully 40% have been either threatened or physically attacked in the 3 years since Trump lost. 90% said that they have been harassed, intimidated, or stalked. 1 in 10 state legislators report that a person with a weapon had tried to intimidate them on one or more occasions. 1 in 5 state officials and almost half of local officials say that because of these threats, they're unwilling to deal with controversial issues like abortion, immigration, or gun control. I mean, it just goes on and on. Last year, Republican anti-abortion extremist Philip Bunyo loaded his car with a hatchet, flares, matches, and bottles and cans filled with gasoline, and then drove to a reproductive care center, Affirmative Care Solutions, rammed his car into the front entrance, told police when he gets out of jail he's going to finish the job. He says he's part of this rescue group with a bunch of guys who have signed the justifiable homicide statement, saying if you kill abortion doctors, that's all good. Last week, an openly Nazi group marched in front of the home of Massachusetts Governor Maura Healey. In Idaho, 31 hateful white supremacists had the case against them dismissed because FBI agents and local prosecutors had accidentally bungled the evidence and interrogations. Last week, a Tennessee man was arrested for trying to participate in a plot with 2 Texas men to visit the southern border and murder Border Patrol agents, along with any immigrants who happened to be standing around. One of them was in possession of 6 semi-automatic firearms, 20 magazines, and around 1,800 rounds of ammunition. The border has been flooded with immigrants ever since Moscow Mike called a press conference and said, the U.S. border is wide open. Johnson, of course, the Speaker of the House, has openly promoted the Great Replacement theory. He said, here's what he said. This is, quote, if you're scratching your head, you've seen the video, you've seen droves of people, 2.4 million people coming over the border illegally, the president allowing it, the Democrats in charge of Congress are allowing it. The deal is they're going to turn them into voters. Right. That's not the deal, as you well know, I'm sure. But, you know, the Great Replacement theory, this was Hitler's theory about Jews. You know, they're out reproducing us. Recently, a convoy of armed white supremacists calling themselves God's Army made their way to the southern border, echoing Trump and Hitler's rhetoric that dark-skinned immigrants are poisoning the blood of America. The FBI had to evacuate the Border Patrol Processing Center because of threats from right-wingers. A few days later, Paul Fay Sr., identified as a malicious sniper, was arrested for planning to murder Border Patrol agents. He thought that if he could kill a few, that would start other white people going out and killing other federal employees. This was, you know, basically the premise of Turner Diaries, the novel that motivated and inspired Tim McVeigh. Fay said that it was the Great Replacement theory, you know, quoted by Mike Johnson, Speaker Mike Johnson, that caused him to want to go murder these people. I mean, America's Voice is a news, you know, agency, and they said America's Voice has identified 120 members of Congress who amplified the replacement and invasion conspiracy in their official capacity just this last year. We've identified over 1,040 times top Republican candidates, officials, or outfits pushed the bigoted fiction in just the last year. We also identified this disturbing practice more than 700 times in 2022. In 2023, the House Republican majority brought 13 witnesses to congressional hearings to promote the Great Replacement theory, including one guy who'd been arrested on January 6th. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. I'm not even halfway through the article of all this lengthy list of everything that has happened literally just in the last couple of weeks. This is called acceleration. These people are quite excited. They're quite giddy about the possibility that they could bring down the American government, they could end our pluralistic society, and they could replace our leadership with a fascist, with a strongman. Because these are frightened little people. These are people who, they're afraid of gay people, they're afraid of trans people, they're afraid of black people, they're afraid of Hispanic people, they're afraid of Asian people, they're afraid of Jews, they're afraid of Muslims. They're living in terror. And as we pointed out yesterday, I mean, Sinclair Broadcasting does surveys to find out what people are afraid of so they can feed them more of it. In addition to bringing you the Thom Hartmann program here on Free Speech TV and Video Media Online, we also have a whole set of ways you can interact with us and tools you can use to spread the word about the importance of democracy and the threats to it in our republic. First, there's your daily homework. Sue Nethercutt puts together a daily email newsletter that has a link to every story I discuss on the air, so you can find my sources and you can share them with your friends. It's free and you can sign up at thomhartmann.com. Second, I publish my daily take every day over at the hartmannreport.com website. That's also free if you want the daily 5 days a week rant in your inbox. No ads either. Third, we have the podcasts. There's the free 1-hour version of our daily show that's advertising supported. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts normally. And then there's also the podcast of the entire 3-hour show with no advertisements, and that's available by subscription over at thomhartmann.com. So check them all out at thomhartmann.com and hartmannreport.com.
We say fight back! from David Enrich's book, Dark Towers, Deutsche Bank, Donald Trump, and an Epic Trail of Destruction. This is from Chapter 10. It's titled The Mar-a-Lago Prize. In 1905, a German immigrant living in the Bronx set up a small barber shop on the ground floor of a newly constructed building at 60 Wall Street, in the heart of Manhattan's booming financial district. In an era before skyscrapers, the 25-story L-shaped tower was a landmark, its gargoyle-guarded roof visible from the nearby waterfront. The barbershop thrived, offering shaves and trims to a procession of bankers, stock exchange traders, lawyers, and office workers. The barber's name was Frederick Trump. The same year that he opened the shop, his wife gave birth to a boy named Fred. Many years passed, and the barbershop closed, and the old 60 Wall Street gave way in 1989 to a new 60 Wall Street, a 47-story tower topped with a distinctive pyramid roof. For a time, it was home to J.P. Morgan and Company. Then the bank left, and in 2005, Deutsche Bank started relocating its American staff, displaced ever since 9/11, to its new home at 60 Wall Street. And so Frederick Trump's grandson, born to Fred's wife in 1946, became an occasional visitor to the site of his grandfather's old barber shop. Deutsche's relationship with Donald Trump had only deepened since Mike Offit left. Justice Justin Kennedy, this is the son of Justice Anthony Kennedy, Justin Kennedy, now a managing director, had become a key point contact for Trump and helped chaperone large real estate deals for him through the bank. Kennedy's role was to find customers to buy portions of loans after Deutsche dispensed the money, a process that allowed Deutsche Bank to make larger loans than it otherwise could have. Kennedy sometimes sat with Trump in his luxury box at the U.S. Open tennis tournament or at Manhattan nightclubs, where Trump would park himself at a table in the corner facing outward, holding court like a mafia don. Now, with Kennedy's encouragement, Deutsche hurried along a Henry Villard-like path. In 2000, the bank had plunked down another $150 million to be used for the renovations of Trump's building at 40 Wall Street. The next year, Deutsche agreed to extend Trump a mortgage worth more than $900 million, at the time the largest ever on a single property, so he could buy the General Motors building on the southeastern corner of New York's Central Park. Trump already owned half of the 50-story building. He wanted the rest. And in 2002, Deutsche agreed to refinance about $70 million that he owed on some of his Atlantic City casinos. Those loans came out of Deutsche's commercial real estate division, which Kennedy was helping to run. Not everyone was enamored with Trump. Seth Waugh, W-A-U-G-H, one of Edson's many Merrill Lynch recruits and the head of Deutsche's American operations, learned around 2001 that the bank was planning to lend Trump about $500 million to use as he wished, basically an unrestricted cash infusion to stabilize the developer's flagging finances. Waugh had previously witnessed up close the carnage that Trump could inflict on imprudent financial institutions. At Merrill, Edison had assigned him the task of mopping up after Trump defaulted on nearly $700 million of bonds that Merrill had helped sell for his Taj Mahal casino in Atlantic City. Waugh was in no hurry to repeat the experience at Deutsche. He voiced strong objections to the proposed new loan to Trump, in which Trump would not have had to put up any hard assets as collateral, and the deal soon died. Yet Deutsche's broader Trump relationship rumbled on. In 2003, another arm of Deutsche, focused on helping companies raise money by selling stocks and bonds to investors, agreed to work with Trump. The point man on this part of the relationship was Richard Byrne, another Merrill veteran who had been involved in the Taj Mahal debacle. Byrne had helped sell the ill-fated Taj bonds to investors. Now Trump hired Byrne's group at Deutsche to issue bonds for his troubled Trump hotel and casino resorts. Byrne knew this would be an uphill battle. Not only had Trump defaulted in the past, but he also had recently been taunting investors that he might stop paying back other outstanding bonds. Waugh didn't warn Byrne about the recently rejected $500 million loan, and so Byrne organized a roadshow for Trump to meet with and try to win over big institutional investors. He escorted Trump to meetings all over New York and Boston. At every stop, boardrooms and auditoriums were jammed with traders, fund managers, senior executives, and secretaries curious to see the Donald show, and Trump didn't disappoint. He rocked, he rolled, and he delivered wildly optimistic and inconsistent financial projections. Afterward, Trump called Byrne to ask how much money they'd raised. The answer, alas, was virtually zero. Byrne braced for an explosion as he explained to Trump that though he'd been treated like a celebrity, nobody trusted him with their money. Trump took the rejection in stride. "Let me talk to your salespeople," he requested. Byrne agreed, and Trump came to deliver a pep talk. "Fellas, I know this isn't the easiest thing you've all had to sell," he acknowledged, "but if you get this done, you'll all be my guests at Mar-a-Lago." Trump was always good at pushing an audience's buttons. A weekend with Trump at Mar-a-Lago, bragging rights that not even money could buy. And this new incentive did the trick. The salesman worked the phones, cast a wider net for more clients, and managed to sell the
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Hey, happy Mittwoch. It's the middle of the week. It's Wednesday. There's a lot going on in the world today. I want to get into how religious anti-abortion Republican freaks are using data brokers to track women. We'll get into that in a moment. Also, the FBI informant got his info from Russian disinformation. We'll dig into that. Letitia James says, she's ready. She's ready to take Donald Trump's buildings if he can't pay his $355 million fine. And also a crazy alert. Cocaine jokes are rolling in as Sean Hannity demands, "Does that look like sawdust to you?" Turns out it is. In the second hour of our program, Matthew Cunningham-Cook is going to drop by. He's got the inside scoop on this company behind the Joe Namath Medicare Advantage ads. It's grody. It's weird. Also, before he went to Mar-a-Lago, Speaker Johnson was talking about not shutting down the government. Now that he's met with Trump, everything has changed because Trump wants Johnson to destroy the economy to hurt Biden. And so, the Putin faction of the Republican Party rolls on. Now they want to destroy our economy. Before, they just wanted to destroy Ukraine. Also, in the third hour of our program, Debbie Hines will be with us, the lawyer and reporter from down south. I believe she's based out of Atlanta, isn't she? Yeah, I believe so. Debbie's been on the program many times before. I want to get into this bogus investigation into Fani Willis and bring us all an update on it. It's kind of fallen off the radar screen of the news. Also, why Elizabeth Warren is urging regulators to block Capital One's takeover of Discover. And Geeky Science, AccuWeather is sounding alarm bells regarding a possible supercharged hurricane season this fall. So a lot going on here. But to start out, how religious anti-abortion Republican freaks are using data brokers to track women. This is spooky stuff. Probably the most high-profile case of this did not involve a woman. It actually involved a gay priest, a bishop, who was rather outspoken against gay people. And his name was Jeffrey Burrill. He was the Monsignor in Wisconsin, a Catholic priest. He was the general secretary of the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops. And some people bought from a data broker, bought information that they could track back to his phone that showed that he was visiting basically gay prostitutes. And that he had he had this gay dating app on his phone, and they were able to track him through that. Well, half the apps on your phone, maybe 3/4, maybe 9/10, I don't know, but most of the apps on your phone, if you go into your control settings and look at location services, you'll see almost every app on your phone every 5 minutes or so is sending, is pinging back to the mothership, the app mothership, where you are. And in many cases, what other apps are open on your phone, in other words, what you're doing. And sometimes even data about what you're doing, URLs that you're visiting and things like that. And there's these data brokers who buy this stuff from the apps. It's a revenue source for the apps. This is how Google makes their money. They sell your data. It's pure and simple, right? They sell it to advertisers. It's how Facebook makes their money. It's how Twitter makes their money. And so now the concern, and it's a very real one and a really legitimate one, is what happens when the anti-abortion freaks get hold of this data. And we have not quite yet hit that point yet, and I think it's because everybody's waiting for the dust to settle on the legal issues. But you get a Republican in the White House who puts into place a nationwide ban, so this is federal law now rather than just state law. Or, Greg Abbott gets reelected and is feeling his oats down in Texas, and he decides to go after women, and all they have to do is just start buying the data of which women have gone to which abortion clinics and what places, who started out in Texas. $10,000 per woman. And it's not like they've never done this before. I mean, last April, police in Nebraska used data that they'd obtained from a social media platform, in this case it was Facebook, to arrest 17-year-old Celeste Burgess and her mother, Jessica Burgess, after Celeste gave birth to a stillborn child, or a stillborn whatever, if the mother and daughter had been discussing obtaining abortion pills on Facebook. They thought it was a private message. It wasn't. Facebook turned it over to the police. 32-year-old Jenny McCormick was charged in Idaho with a 5-year felony of inducing her own abortion. She'd obtained the pills through the mail via the internet. Purvi Patel was sentenced to 20 years in an Indiana prison for getting abortion pills through the mail and using them. On appeal, they lowered that to 18 months, which she had already served in prison at that point. The evidence against her came from her own phone. In Arkansas, Ann Bynum was arrested after giving birth at home to a stillborn fetus. Prosecutors also went after her friend Karen Collins, who helped her obtain abortion pills through the mail. She was sentenced to 6 years in prison. Mississippi prosecutors charged Letitia Fisher with murder following the stillborn birth of her fetus. She'd only known she was pregnant for a month. They seized her phone and found that she'd searched for information on obtaining abortion pills and used that to prosecute her, charging her with murder. She could get the death penalty, although they couldn't find the proof that she'd actually gotten the pills, so they had to drop the charges. I mean, this is just based on what she did on her phone. As Senator Tammy Baldwin noted, quote, the companies collect incredibly precise data location and time data from millions of Americans' phones. That data can reveal where people who visit abortion clinics came from, where they go afterwards, and even where they live. And anyone can buy the company's data. In fact, to add to this, Vice magazine went out and bought data like this, and they got data on who had visited over 600 abortion clinics or places affiliated with abortion clinics, Planned Parenthood centers, all across the country for a 1-week period, and it cost them $120, less than $200. So, I mean, this is serious stuff that we need to be taking seriously. And how did this begin? Well, it began when Donald Trump and Ajit Pai, the Verizon lawyer who Donald Trump put in charge of the FCC, ended net neutrality. We really should not have called it net neutrality. We should have called it net privacy. Because privacy is a positive thing and neutrality is kind of a neutral thing, right? So we kind of played into the hands of the telecom industry when we used the phrase that they wanted, net neutrality. But it used to be that your internet service provider could not spy on you. They could not track everything you do. Now they can, and they do. It used to be they couldn't sell that information. Now they can, and they do. It used to be your phone company couldn't track everything you did, everything you said. Now they can, and they do. And if you're using VoIP phone, if you've got that little button click that says, yes, use internet telephone, then they can listen to your calls as well. And we don't know if they do or not, but they certainly have the legal right to, because of what Donald Trump and Ajit Pai did. They can track and record every website you visit. They can read every email you send or receive. They can log every search you do, even if you're using like DuckDuckGo and other, or other private search engines, because they have all the data going into and coming out of your phone. They know everything that's on your phone, thanks to Donald Trump and Ajit Pai. So bottom line, we got to do something about this. We've got to fix this. Now, data brokering, and by the way, we're the only developed country in the world, just like, with healthcare, we're the only developed country in the world that doesn't have a national healthcare system. We're also the only country in the developed world that allows data brokers to do this and allows apps and web developers and big web companies. It's become a $200 billion a year industry. And if you were to add Facebook and Google to that, their ability to track everything you're doing, it becomes a multi-hundred billion, a $1 trillion a year industry. So, I end the article saying, if Democrats ever take back the House, the Senate, and the White House all at once, this needs to be at the top of their list. But I'm telling you, there's going to be, you've got a $1 trillion industry, a $200 billion data broker industry, and a $1 trillion ad revenue industry at stake here. They are going to spend a fortune on television ads and lobbying and buying politicians to prevent this from happening. But you need to know about this, and you need to know what is entirely possible right now and what might be coming down the road. And the FBI informant who was the basis of the Republicans' fever dream to impeach Joe Biden and throw his son Hunter in prison has just been outed as an agent of Russia. Really? We'll get to that in just a moment. Stay with us.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
And Biden is promising sanctions on Russia. We'll know day after tomorrow, he says. On Friday, he's going to release those sanctions. It's going to get interesting. And welcome back. Picking up your calls here. Scott in Oakland, California. Hey, Scott, what's up?
Hey, Tom, thanks for taking my call. I'm calling about the Smirnoff situation.
Mm-hmm.
It's reported out that he was a long-time informant for the FBI field office.
Right, since 2020.
10 years, they said.
Oh, really? Okay.
10 years.
Wow.
And that he reported in, he checked in with his handler almost every day.
So this guy's been feeding Russian disinformation to the FBI for a decade? Wow.
That's what I've read.
Wow.
It was 10 years. Okay, so this is a Seattle field office. You couple that with what happened in the New York field office with their counterintelligence head, McGonigal, who was getting paid by Russian oligarchs.
Right.
There's a big problem here.
Yeah.
I think Christopher Wray needs to go.
Yeah.
He's got to go.
Yeah.
He's already been questionable. But this points to a long-term programmatic programming that Russia. That's what they do.
Oh, they've been doing this since the 40s.
Long-term, right? But it's a programming. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
It's a project. So all of this stuff that we're seeing, this is the fruits of this programming that's been in place for all this time.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then it's gone all the way into Congress. Obviously, we know this, but when are we going to wake up to this stuff? I don't hear anybody talking about that this guy was. I mean, I read it in news stories, but it's almost
it's like nobody's putting together two and two. No, I totally get it, Scott, and thank you for bringing up McGonigal too. I need to revive that information.
One more thing. There's another story out today about a new lawsuit against the Epstein's money handlers. They're bringing. They're going to claw back money from them, the victims. I think it's over like 75 women. A lot of them were Eastern European.
Mm-hmm.
And in this new reporting, that the entire New York mansion was wired with cameras.
Whoa.
And that they had a central room, a monitoring room,
mm-hmm.
that would monitor everything that was going on in the mansion.
Wow.
And the money from the payoffs, that the settlements for the women that have already received money,
mm-hmm.
where'd they come from? J.P. Morgan and Deutsche Bank. I mean, this thing is so huge. We can't even wrap our heads around how big this thing is.
Yeah.
And we better
how much of the
it.
evidence has vanished now, Scott?
For Epstein?
Yeah, I mean, I'm assuming that. Well, maybe there weren't tapes. Maybe those were just live cameras.
They had to be recording.
Well, they didn't have to be.
It's a honeypot. It's a honeypot.
No, I get that. I mean,
that's.
Epstein was running so your argument here is that at the core, Epstein was running an extortion racket more than anything else,
exactly.
Even more than a sex ring. Yeah, that makes perfect sense, and that also explains why every time they come out and say, "Oh, and we're going to find out who all the names are in his little black book," suddenly Nobody comes up with any names. I get it. Scott, thank you for the call. Wow, amazing stuff. 20 minutes past the hour. We'll be right back. Missed my opening rant today? It's usually published over at HartmannReport.com, where you can read it and share it with your friends for free. Check it out, HartmannReport.com. So a lot of people are wondering, why is it in America that we can't have nice things? Why don't we have, the same things every other democracy has? Every other democracy in the world has a national health care system of some form, and everybody is covered. We don't. We've got 27 million uninsured people and over 100 million underinsured people. Why is that? Why is it that every other country in the world offers college education very inexpensively, if not for free, and for here you go to debt? Why is it that we've got our public schools crumbling and other countries are doing well? Why is it that we've got Medicare being taken apart by this Medicare Advantage scam and nobody will do anything about it? Well, it turns out the reason why it boils down to one thing, one Supreme Court decision, Citizens United, legalizing the bribery of our politicians. There's a whole rant about this over at HartmannReport.com. I think you're going to find it very, very useful. Check it out. So back in 2015, Alexei Navalny's mentor, Boris Nemtsov, was shot dead in the back by Putin's people. In 2015, Mikhail Lesin was beaten to death by Putin's people. In 2013, Boris Bereznikovsky was hung. Anna Politkovskaya in October 2006 was shot while shopping. Alexander Litvenko was poisoned with polonium-209 in 2006. In 2009, Anastasia Emotorivera was abducted and executed. Ravi Mangel in 2022 was thrown off the top of a building. Yevgeny Prigozhin, of course, was famously blown out of the sky. Kirill Sirmazov in 2022 was crushed with their car. And, of course, Alexei Navalny was just murdered in prison. What do these things all have in common? What is the common thread? Vladimir Putin. And what does Vladimir Putin have in common, or what's he up to? Well, he's feeding disinformation into the United States. It turns out that the entire case to impeach Joe Biden, that Jim Jordan has been, yapping like a little dog about, the half-dressed, shouty wrestling coach. It turns out that the entire foundation of that was this one guy's testimony that he was in the room when Joe and Hunter Biden were offered a $5 million bribe. Now, they've denied it. All the other people who were in the room denied it. But this one guy, Alexander Smirnov, says, no, I was there. I saw it. And Jim Jordan has been running with that for 3 years. And then James Comer decided to go after Hunter Biden based on that, as well as impeaching Joe Biden based on that. And now we discover that Alexander Smirnov, for the last decade, has been working for Russian intelligence, feeding lies and disinformation to the FBI. And they just arrested him, and he's facing 25 years in prison now for lying to the FBI about Hunter Biden and Joe Biden. So, the question now is, as Jeff Tiedrich calls them, the moron twins, Jimmy and Jimmy Comer, also known as Comer Pyle, and Jimmy Jordan, also known as Gymnasium Jordan. Did they know that this was false information when they used it for 3 years? Did they know this when they went on Fox News over and over and over again? Or were they just dupes? Were they just useful idiots for Putin? Increasingly, there are calls for James Comer to resign from his position as the head of the House Oversight Committee. Simon Rosenberg said, calls for Comer to resign are cascading across the country. He has betrayed our country. The most significant thing that's happened in America in the last decade is Putin's successful penetration of Trump and the Republican Party. Keith Olbermann says Congressman James Comer needs to resign. John Cooper, the guy who started the Democratic Coalition, James Comer must resign. Dan Goldman, the congressman from New York, wittingly or unwittingly, House Republicans have been acting as an agent or asset of Russian intelligence for Vladimir Putin. I mean, Putin must be laughing his ass off right now. The whole Biden smear campaign, Rudy skulking around Ukraine, the disembodied hard drive, all this, it's all coming out of Russian intelligence. Did Jimmy and Jimmy know? Is that why they refused to let Hunter Biden testify in public? I mean, are they that stupid, or did they really think that we would all just go, oh yeah, oh gee, look at this, it must be a terrible thing. Where there's smoke, there's fire. Jeff Tiedrick says, if I was one of those scammers who pretends to be a Nigerian prince, I'd be sending emails to Comer and Jordan all day long because these gullible rubes are ripe for fleecing. Yeah, indeed. Meanwhile, the prosecutor, David Weiss, the guy who's dragging Hunter Biden through hell, you know, he had worked out a deal where Hunter Biden was going to plead guilty to having checked that box on the gun permit application and having not paid his taxes for 2 years, and then he finally paid them with penalties, so he's all paid up. And typically when, you know, that happens, people, you get a slap on the wrist. And that's what they had come to. And then Alexander Smirnov comes along and says, oh no, he took a $5 million bribe. And suddenly David Weiss, this Republican special prosecutor that Donald Trump put on Hunter Biden, he's going nuts. Going, oh, really? Huh. Hunter Biden took a bribe. Joe Biden, a bribe. Yeah, okay, let's revive this case. And it all goes back to Russian intelligence. Jim Comer, Jim Jordan, I put it to you. Useful idiots, dupes, or actual agents of Putin in the United States the way that Trump is, the way that Moscow Mike Johnson is now, you know, essentially officially an agent of Vladimir Putin. Ted Cruz, officially an agent of Vladimir Putin. Rand Paul, same thing.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Meanwhile, Letitia James says, I'll take that property, and Sean Hannity is become the butt of cocaine jokes. I'll tell you about those after the break and pick up your calls.
Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is by P.E. Moskowitz. It's The Case Against Free Speech, the First Amendment, Fascism, and the Future of Dissent. This is from the introduction. This book is not anti-free speech. It is anti the concept of free speech. It's an important distinction. Everyone should have the right to say what they want. I will not argue otherwise. I am not an authoritarian. In this book, I will not argue that the United States should adopt laws banning racist speech, like the ones that have proliferated throughout Europe, for example. I think those laws are often counterproductive and end up being used against leftists instead of against racists. I won't argue that Nazi speech should be outlawed as it is in Germany. I won't argue that the First Amendment should be reformed nor more firmly upheld. This book is not about whether the First Amendment is good or bad. This book is about why the First Amendment is nearly irrelevant, except in its power as a propaganda tool. In the following chapters, I will argue that free speech as a concept is meaningless, that it is a dialectical smokescreen more than an ideal to be upheld, that in a grossly unequal society, in which a few corporations control the means of media dissemination and a small group of the ultra-wealthy bankroll entire political movements, there can be no meaningful definition of free speech. On paper, I'm free to speak as a billionaire. I am as free to speak as a billionaire. Yet I do not have the power to change laws through political donations, to influence college curricula, or to quash entire movements for economic liberation. And still, I hold more speech power than most. I am a published author, and my speech is sanctified by the gatekeepers of my publishing house. Therefore, the path to free speech, I will argue, has less to do with a law about speech, or many laws, than with ending racism and inequality. Throughout U.S. history, disparate groups have claimed to cherish free speech more than their enemies. Unionists in the 1920s saw free speech as synonymous with striking and ultimately class revolution. Today, conservatives are the group to most often shroud their politics in free speech, arguing that any silencing or protesting of their speech runs counter to U.S. values of freedom and liberty for all. But as I hope to prove in this book, free speech has never really existed because freedom and liberty have never really existed for the vast majority of Americans. Instead, the U.S. has systematically acted against those values, suppressing the opportunities, speech, movements, and actions of the masses, especially people of color and anti-capitalists, in order to favor the free flow of capital to the owning class. This oppression and suppression have been constant since the founding of this country, and therefore free speech is a hollow signifier, pointing to a past that never existed. The funny thing about free speech is that it's been used to fight for and against these liberties, both as a guise for the wealthy and powerful to oppress the poor, like the Koch brothers and their supporters using free speech to push through anti-democratic legislation and rip apart campaign finance laws, and as a rhetorical tool for the working class to further their cause, as happened in the early 1900s when leftists argued that free speech includes the freedom to riot, and the ACLU argued it was the only way to prevent a violent revolution. I don't argue that one definition of free speech is more legitimate than the other, but that they are all relatively empty signifiers, hiding more tangible structures of power and ideas underneath them. So why write a book on free speech if I think the term is essentially meaningless? Because the concept holds so much weight in our country. We argue endlessly about whether it's being trampled on, whether college students hate it, whether the government is adequately upholding it, but we rarely ask what free speech is or how we got to the free speech crisis we supposedly face today. When you scratch the surface of conversations over free speech, you find more difficult issues underneath. It's much easier to talk about the ability of conservatives to speak on college campuses than about the systemic racism, sexism, and transphobia college students experience. And those are the things that students who protest campus visits by right-wing conservatives are actually fighting against. It's easier to fantasize about a country that values free speech than to grapple with the fact that we place so much emphasis on free speech while jailing dissidents and allowing tens of millions to live in poverty. What is free speech to someone who works 60 hours a week and has no time nor any platform to use their supposed right? There is relatively little literature and philosophy on free speech, despite the fact that it has been in constant contention since the founding of this country. Even the legal history of the First Amendment is sparse for something so foundational to the values of our country. A few have seriously grappled with ideas of what free speech does and does not mean, most notably literary theorist Stanley Fish, who has argued that the term does not mean much at all. Leftists like Noam Chomsky have written about free speech tangentially in their explorations of media as a propaganda tool. Most history books on speech are written as hagiographies, unquestioning the intent of the Founding Fathers and their morals, with a few notable exceptions, such as Laura Weintraub's The Taming of Free Speech. I don't intend to fill the yawning gap of research history and philosophy. This is not a definitive account of free speech, but a necessary intervention, prodding us to be more critical of the term, and maybe along with it, of the other lofty concepts we must hold near and dear. The case against free speech. Brock and Expion.
Did you know that every weekday we send out an email before the show giving you all the topics coming up so you can be fully informed and ready to interact with our program? Or that after the show we send out Sue's Stack, a list of every topic I've discussed along with clickable hot links to every source of information I've shared with you on the air? It's all completely free and available over at thom.tv, THOM.tv. Check it out. 34 minutes past the hour. Welcome back. Letitia James told ABC News yesterday that, I believe it was ABC. Yeah, ABC News. That she is prepared to go to court and seek a judgment seizing Donald Trump's assets, his properties, if he fails to cough up the $355 million civil fraud fine and the $100 million in interest that is due to the state of New York for the crimes that he committed to make his money. You know, the old saying, behind every great fortune, there's a great crime. Well, we've discovered Trump's. He lies about everything. I mean, you know, I guess we already knew that, but Letitia James says, nope, we're gonna take you on. Meanwhile, there was Hunter Biden's psychologist or his therapist or the person working with him on his getting clean, on getting sober. Not sure exactly what his title was, but this guy, a fellow who was also in rehab, who didn't know Hunter Biden but was a patient of the same doctor, is a woodworker, and he took a picture of his table saw and all the sawdust from it, and he scraped some of the sawdust into 3 little lines, like, you know, you're going to snort cocaine. The only problem is the lines are like a half-inch thick because it was sawdust, not cocaine, right? And he took a picture of it and he sent it to the doctor saying, this is me reminding myself that I'm sober and I'm never going to do cocaine again. So the doctor emailed that to Hunter Biden saying, you know, look at this, your buddy so-and-so is gotten sober and this is what he sent me. Now, when the Trump people got a hold of Hunter Biden's laptop, or what apparently a clone of his laptop that was provided to this New York computer repair guy by Russian intelligence, when he got a hold of this, there was that picture in there of these 3 lines of sawdust on this plank sitting on the table saw. And so last night, Sean Hannity went on this whole rant about it. They're saying that's sawdust. Does that look like sawdust to you? And somebody on Twitter said, well, it's on top of a saw. Oh, geez. Biden's attorney wrote, multiple sources have pointed out in a review, Discovery confirms this is actually a photo of sawdust from an expert carpenter, and it was sent to Mr. Biden, not vice versa. You know, Comer and Trump and all these guys, they're saying, oh, that was Biden taking a picture of his own cocaine. No, Biden didn't even take the picture. Clerk on Twitter says, each of those lines is at least an inch thick. Sarah B. Califf says, if that's not sawdust, it's really crappy cocaine. Cut with lint. Keith Olbermann says, all these years, Hannity's wonders why he's not getting a sparkle off that really high-grade Bolivian matching sawdust powder. Yes, the credulity of Fox News viewers. Let's pick up your calls here. Pat in Seattle. Hey, Pat, what's on your mind today?
Yes, I wanted to let you know that yesterday you mentioned that, well, it was more than mentioned, you let us know that George Soros was, oh, can you hear me?
Yes, just fine.
Oh, good, okay. That he was purchasing a couple hundred radio stations. Actually, so after that, I went online and looked it up. It's 220 radio stations, and he has purchased them.
He hasn't purchased them. He's put $400 million into helping bail the company out of a $1 billion bankruptcy. So they're still looking for more investors. And while he has a minority position, he's got the largest minority position right now.
Okay. Well, I misunderstood that. I just read it fast. But yeah. So in any case, I guess that does affect how much influence he would have on it. But one of the things on that website, there was a place where you could send comments. Mm-hmm. It just, you give your name, and I gave my email and the phone number, and you could send a comment. And what I put in there, that I listened to the Thom Hartmann show, on National Public Radio all the time, and it's a great program. And I just said that as soon as he's able to, Soros should get these stations up and running and try to provide more progressive before the election if possible. There's not that much time. But then the last sentence I just wanted to say, I just said Thom Hartmann would be an excellent resource for helping the Soros's people or whoever the agencies are to get these stations with progressive programs established, for the election. I just wanted you to know I put your name there.
Thank you, Pat.
Because Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I just think you have said that there are like just only a handful, maybe only 5 progressive talk shows around the country, whereas
Right.
I think you said there were over 1,000 of the ultra right wing and conservative.
Yes, that's true. I'm not sure 5. There's more than 5 progressive stations, but there's really 4 or 5 large ones, and all the rest are fairly small stations, which is great. I mean, we'll take we've got several hundred of them. We're very happy to have small stations, but if Soros, well, we'll see what happens. I mean, the right wing went hysterical about this yesterday.
I saw that.
Yeah, it was all over the right-wing news. It was in the New York Post and everything else, and they're all freaking out, thinking George Soros is going to do exactly what you're suggesting, Pat. Whether he will have the ability to do that is unknown at this point. I don't think he has enough of an investment that he can control the behavior of the company yet. But there are rumors that he's trying to buy even more of it. I'm just going to sit this one out and wait and see what happens. If they reach out to me, I'm glad to do anything I can to help. If they want to carry my show, great. If they don't want to carry my show, that's great too. I just wish them well, and because we need good progressive programming in this country. Pat, I got to move along, but thank you for the call and thanks for the heads up on that.
Claire, that they control, I don't know how many TV programs, and the opposite, the very ultra conservative. Is it St. Clair or Santa Clair or something like that? Sinclair Broadcasting on television, and then you've got about 1,500 right-wing radio stations across the country, and another 400 or 500. I've heard as many as 800, but I think it's probably closer to 400 or 500 religious stations that regularly engage in political programming in the context of religion. So yeah, there's a lot of it out there. Pat, thank you for the call. Judy in Grand Junction, Colorado. Hey, Judy, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. Long time.
Thank you.
Yeah, I jumped from Sarah Huckabee, Arkansas, was where I used to be, to Bobert's country. So,
oh my!
I have three quick comments that I want to throw out to you and your very smart listeners. The adjournment by the House, Article 1, Section 3, not more than 3 days without consent of both chambers. Religious test, Article 6, Paragraph 3, the last sentence, no religious test shall ever be required as a qualification to any office as public trust under the United States. As for the Petri dish, no brain, no soul, no life, no rights.
Okay, I get it.
If we're dead when our brain dies, then we're not alive when the brain isn't formed yet.
I think that's a really good point. It's a very good point.
I'm going to toss that out and let you guys deal with it.
Okay.
I'm making me a bumper sticker to put in my back window. No brain, no soul, no life, no rights.
There you go. Okay, you're a meme machine here today, Judy. Thank you for the call. Diane in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Hey, Diane, what's up?
Yes, hello, Tom. I'm getting frustrated with President Biden. I called him this morning and told him such with the Ukraine issue. And is his hands tied as much as they appear to be?
I believe so.
Because I looked I just kind of bumped into the National Security Act, and he could, according to this, he could send the ATACM missiles, the ones that Ukraine is begging for. And they could swap them out with another country the same way they did with the tanks.
Right.
They would. Why isn't he trying everything? Why is he sitting back and just letting the conservatives just play their games? I mean, these are lives on the line.
Yeah.
And it seems he isn't. Oh, what's the word?
I don't know, Diane. I get your concern and I share it. That said, I know that the Biden administration is very committed to Ukraine not losing this war, and it would surprise me if there's not a lot going on in the background that they don't want us to know about. And it's entirely possible that Ukraine losing that city, Arcadia or whatever it is, that might be something that is going to finally bring enough pressure on Republicans to force them to stop bowing down and kissing Putin's ass. I mean, I'm not holding my breath, I'm fully expecting the GOP, as long as it's, professing loyalty to Donald Trump, to continue to profess loyalty to Vladimir Putin as well, and to the principles of dictatorship as opposed to democracy. But, it's
trickling down to the legislature even.
I know.
I mean, we are just in gridlock here. Why? Because of Putin halfway around the world, that's a monster.
Yeah.
And it just seems like Biden could use America to lead the way and show that we are a democratic society and we have a backbone.
Yeah.
Putin, all his threats, has never followed through on them. And yet we seem to just huddle in the corner afraid of him.
I'm not sure that that's an accurate characterization, Diane. And but like I said, I'm guessing that there's an awful lot we don't know that's going on. I got to run. 45 minutes past the hour. Thank you, Diane.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archive.
The most important thing we can all be doing right now is calling 202-224-3121, asking for a member of the House of Representatives and giving them hell about this. And welcome back. Let's see here. Tom in Port St. Lucie, Florida. Hey, Tom, what's on your mind today?
Tom, how you doing? That's a big deal. What you were mentioning earlier in regard to the phones and how you submit, and how they invade your privacy.
Yeah.
And I quite often bring that up to a lot of people. And they all agree. It's not a good thing at all.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I wrote a book about it, The Hidden History of Big Brother.
I need to read that.
Yeah, it's grim stuff.
Definitely. And or refer it as well. Yeah. But, I think it was a guy played by Cheech Martin, Cheech and Chong.
Right.
What is it with him and telephones? And the other guy says, he says it's because he hears voices. And I'm thinking to myself, yeah, that's what makes me nervous about phones.
Yeah.
That said, shouldn't I be paying people for that very...
Well, this is the interesting thing, Tom. The way these guys make money, the way that Elon Musk is making money with Twitter, the way that Mark Zuckerberg is making money with Facebook, is people like you and me provide them with content for free. We go on their website and we post, some story, or we rant about something, and then somebody else sees that and they respond to it. All of the content on Facebook was not acquired by Facebook. It was given to them by their customers. Or actually, we're not their customers. We're the product that they're selling. All of the content, right across the board. And I'm with you. I think that I think we should be paid for providing them with content. It ain't going to happen, I can tell you, because their business model is so lucrative. But it's an amazing gig. It's like it's like setting up a storefront and saying, bring in the stuff you don't want, or bring in your stuff, and we'll sell it and make money on it, and we'll keep all the money. and that's what's going on. Right. So I'm with you. And
the older you get.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No, I agree. Tom, thank you very much. Tim in Aloha, Oregon. Hey, Tim, what's on your mind today?
Good to talk to you. My phone went dead yesterday.
Okay.
Rather unfortunate, but hopefully you can hear me now. But this whole thing with Tucker Carlson, the explanation is very simple. What the Republican hierarchy did is they sent the guy over there. He's talking to Putin saying, look, we're going to do everything we can to prevent the Ukraine from getting any supplies they need to take you on, and then we're going to try to shut the economy down. And that'll hopefully get us back into office, and then when that's done, we'll hand you the keys to the car. That's what they're basically saying to him.
Yep, I agree. I absolutely agree.
It's as simple as that.
Yep.
And this thing with Epstein, do you think that all the the multimillionaires and billionaires that were using him, we're going to let him get away with that?
No.
I'll guarantee you what happened. Laura went in and probably sat down with him and said, look, you're in real trouble. And he said, I'm not the only one in trouble. Wait till I come out with the information I have on all these big shots. And so he went back to the Republican Party and said, what are we going to do? And they said, well, tell him we'll do anything we can to get him out of there, but he's going to hand that information over to him. And I'll guarantee you that's what happened. Then what happened to him? He committed suicide. Give me a break.
Yeah. No, I don't. If you believe that, I got to brid you, Tom. Or Tim, excuse me. Thank you. Thank you very much. We'll be right back. Hey, thanks so much for sharing our program and for reaching out to our stations and sponsors and letting them know that you're listening. It really means a lot to us. You know, one of the grand questions that political scientists have been scratching their heads over for years in America is, why do right-wing billionaires fund anti-black history movements? Why are they pouring money into these people? Why are they funding anti-trans movements? I mean, what does this have to do with being a billionaire? Well, it turns out it has a lot to do with it, and here's why. Almost 30 million Americans lack health insurance. 37 million of us live in dire poverty. 1 in 5 of us are illiterate. A quarter of Americans suffer from a diagnosable mental illness and can't get treatment. 316 people are shot every day in America. 44% of us carry student debt. And the billionaires don't want to pay income taxes to deal with any of these problems of society. That's the real issue. If they can get us fighting with each other over black history or over trans people or kids, they win. Then we're not talking about taxing them, raising their taxes to where they should be. There's a whole rant about this over at HartmannReport.com that you can read and see all the stats and all the hot links. Check it out. Welcome back. 9 minutes before the hour, picking up your calls here. Fred in Yorkville, California, listening on KZYX. Hey, Fred, what's up?
Hey, Tom. I'm sure you remember before Zelensky in Ukraine, there was a wannabe dictator named Poroshenko. And one of the tools that they used to get rid of him was something called the Orange Revolution.
I think you're thinking of Yanukovych. Poroshenko was a Democrat. Petro Poroshenko, he was not a wannabe dictator. He was just very corrupt. And he was the guy that was beat in the election by Zelensky. The guy before Poroshenko that was taken down by the Orange Revolution was, I just said his name a minute ago, and now it's escaped me. Say that again?
Yeah, you're right.
Yanukovych, that's right, Yanukovych.
But I was very...
And Yanukovych was put into office by Paul Manafort, by the way, the guy who also ran Trump's 2016 campaign. Go ahead.
Right, but I remember it was a very skillful tactic what they did. They picked something innocuous like wearing orange, which they couldn't just lock everybody up for. And on certain days, everybody who hated this guy would wear orange.
Yep.
And it was very effective. What would happen in Russia? I know that there's a lot of Russians that don't like Putin. Why couldn't they pull something like that in Russia?
Because it's a police state. He's arresting people right now for putting flowers on the memorial for Navalny.
I know. For memorializing Navalny, I know that.
He just arrested an American for giving a $50 donation to the Ukraine charity Rezom.
So if they wore orange on one day, they'd be arrested.
They'd go to jail in a heartbeat. He was arresting people who were holding blank pieces of paper as signs.
Oh.
I mean, this was in the protests, 5-6 months ago? There was a small, a substantial protest for a day or two. And they were hauling off people who were holding signs. And so some people, an old lady, I saw this on TV, this little old lady, babushka, holding a blank piece of paper, like saying, I protest, but I'm not going to offend you. And they hauled her off to jail. So, no, I don't think an Orange Revolution would work in Russia right now. But that's clearly what Putin is afraid of. And that's why he's cracking down every little tiny bit of dissent. And that is exactly what Donald Trump has said he will do if he becomes president. He's going to build concentration camps, and he's going to put his political enemies in them. And he's going to own the libs. Yep. Fred, thank you. Thank you for the call. I think you're spot on. Appreciate the call. Mike in Hope Sound, Florida. Hey, Mike, what's up?
Hey, Tom. I've been on hold, but I I don't want to lose my train of thought because I really want to talk about Putin, but I got to say something. This talk about Epstein being murdered, it really hurts our belief in conspiracy theories. Let me just say this outright. Epstein was a pedophile and a rapist. He wasn't afraid of anything they were going to out him on. The only thing he was afraid of was to be put in general population, which is why he had his lawyers get him solitary, which is why he was able to control his own suicide. I strongly believe that's what happened, and I believe that's a crime, that he should never have been allowed to do that.
Yeah.
Now, for people
well,
like
they turned off the cameras, in fact, you'll recall. They turned off the cameras in that cell block. So this was, the question is, did Epstein pay for and set this up himself, which is entirely possible, or did somebody else, which is also entirely possible?
Yeah, no, I strongly believe that he was given every opportunity using his power and money to off himself because his main fear was general population.
I think you're probably right, Mike, but let's get to what you actually called about because we only have a minute left before we hit the end of the show.
Okay, here,
at the end of the hour.
It's quick. Putin has done more damage to the world and to our country than Hitler did leading up to 1937-38. Now, I don't mean to the world, but I mean to the United States. Right. We poo-pooed Hitler just as England did. Yep. I don't know how you feel about this, but that guy needs to be taken out. And I don't know how long we're going to wait to do something about this. He already destroyed an election. He murders people constantly.
Yeah, it's not our job to do that, Mike. That's for the Russian people. You know, if we did that, it would start World War III.
Well, maybe, but that's a choice, and I agree that yes, it is the choice of the people. But they have failed in taking him out.
And when Putin goes down, Medvedev is standing right there saying, "Okay, I'll pick up where he left off."
Yeah, I think you and I both think that that's going to change the whole picture of everything.
I do. I actually do, but I wouldn't put all my eggs in that one basket.
I agree. Well, I appreciate it. And you have smart callers, except for me.
No, you're doing great, Mike. You're doing great. And this whole question of how long can Putin hang on? I mean, there was that, a year or so ago when people thought he had thyroid cancer or something, and there were all those rumors. Apparently, he's doing just fine. Thank you very much.
More Russian misinformation.
Yeah, well, or the miracle of modern medicine. I mean, we don't know. But Mike, thank you for the call. Spot on. And thanks for listening to us on Sirius XM down there in Hope Sound, Florida. We'll be back. On the other side of this break, Matthew Cunningham-Cook is going to drop by to fill us in on the company behind those Joe Namath ads. This is going to get weird. Stay around. Stick around.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
In addition to bringing you the Thom Hartmann program here on Free Speech TV and Video Media Online, we also have a whole set of ways you can interact with us and tools you can use to spread the word about the importance of democracy and the threats to it in our republic. First, there's your daily homework. Sue Nethercutt puts together a daily email newsletter that has a link to every story I discuss on the air, so you can find my sources and you can share them with your friends. It's free and you can sign up at thomhartmann.com. Second, I publish my daily take every day over at the hartmannreport.com website. That's also free if you want the daily 5 days a week rant in your inbox. No ads either. Third, we have the podcasts. There's the free 1-hour version of our daily show that's advertising supported. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts normally. And then there's also the podcast of the entire 3-hour show with no advertisements, and that's available by subscription over at thomhartmann.com. So check them all out at thomhartmann.com and hartmannreport.com.
We say fight back!
Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is by P.E. Moskowitz. It's The Case Against Free Speech, the First Amendment, Fascism, and the Future of Dissent. This is from the introduction. This book is not anti-free speech. It is anti the concept of free speech. It's an important distinction. Everyone should have the right to say what they want. I will not argue otherwise. I am not an authoritarian. In this book, I will not argue that the United States should adopt laws banning racist speech, like the ones that have proliferated throughout Europe, for example. I think those laws are often counterproductive and end up being used against leftists instead of against racists. I won't argue that Nazi speech should be outlawed, as it is in Germany. I won't argue that the First Amendment should be reformed, nor more firmly upheld. This book is not about whether the First Amendment is good or bad. This book is about why the First Amendment is nearly irrelevant, except in its power as a propaganda tool. In the following chapters, I will argue that free speech as a concept is meaningless, that it is a dialectical smokescreen more than an ideal to be upheld, that in a grossly unequal society, in which a few corporations control the means of media dissemination and a small group of the ultra-wealthy bankroll entire political movements, there can be no meaningful definition of free speech. On paper, I'm free to speak as a billionaire. I am as free to speak as a billionaire. Yet I do not have the power to change laws through political donations, to influence college curricula, or to quash entire movements for economic liberation. And still, I hold more speech power than most. I am a published author, and my speech is sanctified by the gatekeepers of my publishing house. Therefore, the path to free speech, I will argue, has less to do with a law about speech, or many laws, than with ending racism and inequality. Throughout U.S. history, disparate groups have claimed to cherish free speech more than their enemies. Unionists in the 1920s saw free speech as synonymous with striking and ultimately class revolution. Today, conservatives are the group to most often shroud their politics in free speech, arguing that any silencing or protesting of their speech runs counter to U.S. values of freedom and liberty for all. But as I hope to prove in this book, free speech has never really existed, because freedom and liberty have never really existed for the vast majority of Americans. Instead, the U.S. has systematically acted against those values, suppressing the opportunities, speech, movements, and actions of the masses, especially people of color and anti-capitalists, in order to favor the free flow of capital to the owning class. This oppression and suppression have been constant since the founding of this country, and therefore free speech is a hollow signifier, pointing to a past that never existed. The funny thing about free speech is that it's been used to fight for and against these liberties, both as a guise for the wealthy and powerful to oppress the poor, like the Koch brothers and their supporters using free speech to push through anti-democratic legislation and rip apart campaign finance laws, and as a rhetorical tool for the working class to further their cause, as happened in the early 1900s when leftists argued that free speech includes the freedom to riot, and the ACLU argued it was the only way to prevent a violent revolution. I don't argue that one definition of free speech is more legitimate than the other, but that they are all relatively empty signifiers, hiding more tangible structures of power and ideas underneath them. So why write a book on free speech if I think the term is essentially meaningless? Because the concept holds so much weight in our country. We argue endlessly about whether it's being trampled on, whether college students hate it, whether the government is adequately upholding it, but we rarely ask what free speech is, or how we got to the free speech crisis we supposedly face today. When you scratch the surface of conversations over free speech, you find more difficult issues underneath. It's much easier to talk about the ability of conservatives to speak on college campuses than about the systemic racism, sexism, and transphobia college students experience. And those are the things that students who protest campus visits by right-wing conservatives are actually fighting against. It's easier to fantasize about a country that values free speech than to grapple with the fact that we place so much emphasis on free speech while jailing dissidents and allowing tens of millions to live in poverty. What is free speech to someone who works 60 hours a week and has no time nor any platform to use their supposed right? There is relatively little literature and philosophy on free speech, despite the fact that it has been in constant contention since the founding of this country. Even the legal history of the First Amendment is sparse for something so foundational to the values of our country. A few have seriously grappled with ideas of what free speech does and does not mean, most notably literary theorist Stanley Fish, who has argued that the term does not mean much at all. Leftists like Noam Chomsky have written about free speech tangentially in their explorations of media as a propaganda tool. Most history books on speech are written as hagiographies, unquestioning the intent of the Founding Fathers and their morals, with a few notable exceptions, such as Laura Weintraub's The Taming of Free Speech. I don't intend to fill the yawning gap of research history and philosophy. This is not a definitive account of free speech, but a necessary intervention, prodding us to be more critical of the term, and maybe along with it, of the other lofty concepts we must hold near and dear. The case against free speech.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome to the second hour of our program. On the line with us, Matthew Cunningham-Cook. He's a researcher and writer focusing on healthcare, capital markets, and retirement policy. His most recent piece is for Wendell Potter's Substack newsletter. It's called Healthcare Uncovered. You can find it at wendellpotter.substack.com. And Matthew, the title to Matthew's piece is Company Behind Joe Namath Medicare Advantage Ads Has a Long Rap Sheet of Misconduct. Fascinating. Matthew, welcome to the program. Tell us about this company. Where did they come from? Who are they? And why are we seeing 3,670 of their advertisements between October 15 and December 7th last year?
Yeah, so they are one of the most recognizable ads for Medicare Advantage. Former football superstar Joe Namath, who's now 80 years old, hawking the Medicare Coverage Helpline, which is what's called a third-party marketing organization, which generates leads that are then sold off to brokers who then set up seniors with a Medicare Advantage plan with United Health or Humana or one of the Blue Cross Blue Shield plans or whichever. And yeah, what we found in our story is that this company has gone through 4 or 5 different name changes in 6 years. It just emerged out of bankruptcy. It was prosecuted by the Securities and Exchange Commission. It was prosecuted by the Federal Trade Commission.
Well, didn't they go into bankruptcy because they got hit with a huge judgment for fraud?
Yeah, they went into bankruptcy because they got hit with at the same time as getting hit with a huge judgment for fraud. They didn't try to escape paying that $100 million fine to the FTC. Really, what we found is they were trying to escape pending class action lawsuits for their violation of the Telephone Consumer Protection Act, which prevents telemarketers from basically cold calling without ultimately revealing the final employer that they are working for, in this case, a Medicare Advantage insurance plan or a Medicare Advantage broker. And we revealed court filings that haven't been publicly reported until now that suggest that there were 7 million phone numbers in this company that's now called Blue Lantern, and before that was called Benefit, and before that was called Health Insurance Innovations. Had 7 million numbers, dialed people 16 million times, all of them potential violations of the TCPA. And under this bankruptcy, they're now basically free from that litigation. So to still be liable for their TCPA violations, people impacted by their potentially criminal behavior have to affirmatively opt out from the litigation release authorized by the Southern Texas Bankruptcy Court. And so obviously that's going to be an enormously difficult hurdle for 7 million people to do that, and that means that the economic value to any class action litigation going forward is very limited.
Is marginal.
It's unlikely that litigation.
So I grew up with Joe Namath. You know, they called him Broadway Joe, and he was he was a major football star. But he always, he used to dress in these long, fur coats and things. He was always like Mr. Flashy. He was very, very, very kind of part of the culture, I guess, back in the 70s and 80s, or whatever the era was. It was when I was much, much younger. How does Joe Namath feel about this? Does he realize that he's a front man for what is alleged to be a skeezy company, for lack of a better phrase, or is that just fine with him? Is he concerned about his reputation? I don't get it.
Yeah, the New Republic, his agent said to the New Republic, that he's not in charge of vetting in 2021, that he's not in charge of vetting who he works for. But what we report in the story too is that Joe Namath has a history of associating with shady characters, and so this is kind of par for the course.
Oh yeah, he owned a restaurant that was the mob hangout.
A bar.
Right. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah. He co-owned a bar that had a bunch of mobsters and who liked to hang out there, and as a result, the NFL commissioner made him sell his interest in the bar, and then later on, it just came out last year that he employed a prolific pedophile coach at one of his football camps, and he's now being sued by one of the victims of that coach under New York's Child Victims Act, which opened the door for a bunch of litigation.
Right.
So, yeah, I think it's I think this is. He sees dollar signs, is my guess, and that's where he's going to go.
Here we have a company that has a long history of basically fraud or something close to it. That has gotten them into legal trouble, that has generated millions of dollars in judgments against them, and yet they continue selling, they continue hustling these Medicare Advantage plans. Is that because these plans are just so insanely profitable that there's just so much money sloshing around that they can deal with a $100 million fine and they can pay Joe Namath millions of dollars presumably for doing this? Is this more than anything else a testimonial to what a ripoff Medicare Advantage is?
Yeah, I wrote an article last year for The Lever about how these Medicare Advantage costs the federal government as much as $140 billion annually relative to what traditional Medicare costs. So this is a world historic, scam, basically. It's like those of us on the left are always talking about Lockheed Martin and defense contractors, very valid critiques, but actually I would argue that Medicare Advantage goes beyond any of the profiteering that you see at the Pentagon. And that is, it's enormously profitable. I have a story coming out that just tracks the dividends and stock buybacks. United Health in 2023 spent almost $15 billion last year on dividends and stock buybacks. That was 50% higher than the year before. So there's huge money there. And I do think that this company, even with all of its shady characters and prosecutions and changes of name, has kind of figured out a secret sauce for getting more seniors into Medicare Advantage. And that's why it's continued to exist despite all of these prosecutions. So, under its current form, it's owned by Madison Dearborn, which is a Chicago-based private equity firm that has close ties to Rahm Emanuel, the ambassador to Japan and former mayor of Chicago. It's you don't always see that, right? That a small company with a long history of criminal misconduct that will continue to survive. But in this case, it does, and I think it's a testament to their ability to kind of figure out how to open the funnel and get more seniors into these very costly.
It's an amazing
plans.
story. It's an amazing story. You can read it. Did you say it was also published over at the New Republic?
No.
Okay.
The Republic wrote it.
Yeah, you can read it over at Healthcare Uncovered, wendellpotter.substack.com by Matthew Cunningham-Cook. Matthew, thank you so much for dropping by.
Thanks so much, Tom. I appreciate it.
This
My pleasure.
is the Thom Hartmann program.
15 minutes past the hour, back with more of the news of the day, how Russia rewards brutality, and your calls right after this. And welcome back. Let's see here. Mark in San Clemente, California. Hey, Mark, what's on your mind today?
How you doing, Tom? Hey, I really liked your readings on Moskowitz. Isn't that guy sharp or what?
Yeah, he is.
And it's funny because, everybody's hollering for, people are too old in government. We need new people. Well, the Democrats seem to be coming up with plenty of smart, educated people that are very articulate, and the Republicans keep coming up with boobs that don't know what the heck they're talking about.
That's because there's no there there.
They can't
It's a
even
scam.
read.
The GOP is now a scam, and it's a front group for the morbidly rich and the obscenely large monopolistic corporations, and that's it. I mean, it's just...
Well, and another interesting thing that I just experienced for the first time, I do my taxes pretty early, and I go to a preparer, and, they always ask you, well, are you in the stock market? Have you bought any stocks? No, I can't afford that because I can't afford to lose my money. But then she goes, well, have you bought any Bitcoin? And I said, well, that's not on you. You know how I stand on Bitcoin. I don't believe in anything you can't hold in your hand. It's blockchain and all that. It might be very secure. And I know people that have, had Bitcoin and suddenly it disappeared on them, which happens, you know. But if I would have said yes, and, how much Bitcoin do I have, and then she would have put it on my tax returns, that means that they're surveilling it at the IRS to see who is involved in it and who's declaring it, which it should be a private thing, right? Like free speech, like Moskowitz said, most people don't have the ability to get out and, because they're too busy working and trying to make a living.
Well, it's a commodity now. I mean, I don't think we should think of Bitcoin as a currency. We should think of it as an exchangeable commodity, like gold, There are people you can pay with gold.
So what are they surveilling, though, by asking you if you've got it or not, if you have to declare it?
Is that a form on the tax things this year?
Thing is coming up, huh?
Is that a question on the tax forms this year, or was your person?
Well,
just
I don't know.
Snoopy?
Why would they ask me that?
Well, maybe she was just trying to determine if you had. Well, I don't know why she would. I didn't know that you had to declare Bitcoin.
That's why I'm bringing it up. It's kind of like free speech. When I have a chance to, bring something up.
Well, if you buy something, it's like saying, okay, do you own clothes? Do you own a car? Do you own, a lawnmower? I mean, what? So what?
Well, yeah,
you own something you bought with your own money. Or unless she was saying, do you buy Bitcoin that has increased in value, and that would be the one thing. If you had a capital gain.
The fiat cash that we have
then it would be
now,
like art that has appreciated,
Well, they can't track it, because if you got it in your hand and you spend it on something, they really can't track it. Right. If they go to digital currency with CBDs, CBCDs, where everybody's got to have a wallet, and everybody's got to be tracked by the government to see whether you're paying taxes and whether you're this and that and the other thing and what you're spending it on. There's not enough cash in the system as it is to cover how much debt there is in the system. Maybe a third of the cash is actually available.
You're absolutely right. We because of fractional banking and because of just basically the way American capitalism is organized, The one thing that does occasionally wake me up at night is the possibility of a credit crisis. Mark, thank you for the call. And thanks for watching us on YouTube there in San Clemente. We'll be right back. Change starts with you. You can be calling your Democratic or Republican representatives to let them know what you think by calling 202-224-3121. It's the Capitol switchboard. It'll get you right through to them. So every time we have an election, I mean, most recently we saw this in 2022, Putin and Mohammed bin Salman, Russia and Saudi Arabia, start raising the price of oil, basically to stick it to the Democrats, hoping that they can lose power. I mean, it worked in 2022. They got their majority in the House of Representatives. And you'll recall all those $6 gasoline and $5 gasoline, and everybody squealing about it, and the little stickers they were putting on pumps with pictures of Joe Biden saying, I did this. Well, they're preparing to do it again. They've cut production, Saudi Arabia and Russia, and it's going to get a whole lot worse over the course of the next year as we're heading toward 2024. So what can we do about this? Well, I have a very specific proposal, and by the way, 70 different environmental groups have joined in this, along with Senator Ed Markey and several members of Congress, and that is to ban the export of American-produced crude oil. Make America energy independent, and we control the price. There's a piece about it over at HartmannReport.com. Check it out. 21 minutes past the hour. And let's see here, company behind Joe Namath. Oh yes, this is an interesting story. Vladimir Putin has apparently is rewarding brutality, shall we say? The guy, the boss, the guy who was in charge of the jail where Navalny was murdered. His name is Valery Boyarinov. He's 53 years old. He was just given a huge raise 3 days after Navalny was killed. He was awarded the military rank of Colonel General of the Internal Service. Apparently, rewarding him for his torture of. This guy's a famous torturer, by the way. At least according to the director of Mr. Navalny's anti-corruption foundation, Ivan Zandov. He wrote on X, this is the personal reward for torture and murder from Putin. He also alleged that he is, actually the human rights group, Gulagu.net, said that he was, quote, the curator of torture conveyors. And since July 2022, this experienced sadist from torture school has held the post of first deputy and oversees all operational work of the Gulag of the 21st century. He fulfilled Putin's wish, the physical elimination of his main political opponent. It's amazing. He said people in there are beaten with batons, choked, pepper sprayed, tied up, forced into awkward positions, and subjected to humiliating procedures. The jail is known to locals as the end of the world. And now that Navalny's mother has been standing outside the prison saying, "Where's my son's body?" As soon as she started doing that, her name is Ludmila Navalny, and as soon as she started doing that, Putin ordered Navalny's brother, Oleg, who is not, all that politically active, to be arrested. So now, Mom has another son who is going off. Meanwhile, here in the United States, President Biden and the Biden White House have warned all Americans who are in Russia right now to leave Russia right now. There's a level 4 do not travel advisory out. Biden on Friday is going to issue these really severe sanctions on Russia. Obviously, he's expecting that there will be blowback that might be directed at Americans in Russia. John Kirby, who is the National Security Advisor and spokesperson, the National Security spokesperson for the White House, he said, if the Ukrainians aren't better supplied, if they don't get a relief from the shortage of ammunition that they're suffering right now, this move on Avdiivka could actually have a larger effect on the fighting in the east and the amount of territory that the Russians might be able to get over time. Foreign policy journalist Laura Rosen said, quote, Ukrainian troops were forced to withdraw from the city of Avdiivka on Saturday because they practically ran out of supplies, including artillery ammunition. Kirby said, I want to reiterate our very strong warnings about the dangers to U.S. citizens in Russia. It's a good one. Meanwhile, last week, Moscow Mike Johnson was talking about how we're not going to shut down the government. We've got these two continuing resolutions. One comes up on 1st of March, the other on the 8th of March. Those will be the times we'll have to shut down the government. But don't worry, we're going to work things out. And then yesterday he went down to Mar-a-Lago to kiss Trump's ass. And after the ass kissing, Moscow Mike started talking about, well, maybe we'll have a government shutdown. In fact, one Republican lawmaker confided to a news outlet, to Axios, people are predicting a shutdown even if it's just a few days. If a budget deal is not worked out, it will trigger a 1% across-the-board cut in spending. And they're not supposed to return to work until February 28th, and March 1st is the beginning of the shutdown, which is, 2 days later. This is a leap year. We have 29 days in February, but that's it. And if the budget or stopgap isn't passed by March 8th, according to Axios, expect to see the government shut down. Now, why would they want to do this? Why would, when Mike Johnson goes down to Mar-a-Lago to kiss Trump's behind and get his marching orders, order number one, do whatever Putin wants. In other words, no more weapons for Ukraine. Number two, let's try to damage the United States. If we can damage the U.S. economy, if we can throw people out of work, if we can make people hurt, they will blame Joe Biden because he's the president. They will not blame Donald Trump. He's not the president. And so Trump says to Speaker Johnson, to Moscow Mike, he says, just destroy the economy. Shut down the government for a couple of weeks. Throw the country into a recession. Downgrade the country's credit rating. I mean, the last time this happened, which is when Barack Obama was in the White House, they downgraded our credit rating. It cost us $1 trillion in additional interest that we had to pay over the next decade. I mean, it's clear that Donald Trump and Moscow Mike want to hurt America because they think that will work to their political advantage. This is as disgusting and craven as you can imagine, as it can get. So stay tuned. In a couple of weeks, we're going to find out how this plays out.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
But however it plays out, it's not looking good. I'll be back with your calls on the other side of this break.
Today is How to Get Rid of a President by David Priess. And this is from the chapter Rejected by the Party, starting on page 12, kind of mid-chapter. Presidents need not be thrown out at the polls on Election Day to find themselves dislodged from the White House. History shows us that a chief executive's own political allies can remove that incumbent when they perceive him as unpopular or unfit. Refusing to nominate a president for a second term, or better yet, getting the incumbent to realize that he should walk away before it becomes an embarrassing vote at the convention, does bring the party significant pain. But many politicians have calculated that discarding their own party's toxic president by internal action is better than waiting for the voters to do it. This dynamic remained absent for the first half century or so of American politics. George Washington, who didn't represent any formal party, set a precedent by stepping away from re-election after 2 terms. Successor after successor followed suit, keeping the support of their parties until they left office after 8 years. Jefferson, Madison, Monroe, and Jackson lost the next election, both Adamses and Van Buren, or met the Grim Reaper, Harrison. John Tyler, if only in this one respect, was a trendsetter. He began a 6-president cascade of men who failed to appear on their party's ballot in the general election after their first term. One, Zachary Taylor, literally had no choice. Like Harrison, he died in office. The others, by staying alive through their 4-year terms, could have carried their party's banners again on Election Day. Not one did, as national agonizing over slavery and other tensions within each of the major parties made it difficult for any president to build and sustain a governing coalition. Of those 5 chief executives, only James Polk left with a solid reputation and a ledger of successes. He'd told Democrats upon his nomination in 1844, "I shall enter upon the discharge of the high and solemn duties of the office with the settled purpose of not being a candidate for re-election." And he stayed true to his word. It was just as well. Only 3 months after what would have been his second inauguration, he died at the age of 53. The 3 presidents who followed Polk, the forgettable series of Millard Fillmore, Franklin Pierce, and James Buchanan, shared 3 characteristics. First, historians routinely rank them among the nation's worst presidents. Second, and related to that, they took no responsibility for resolving the national moral failure of slavery. And third, no matter how they had attained office, they, like future presidents Chester Arthur and Lyndon Johnson, found themselves spurned by their own parties. The Whigs had learned in 1840 that a celebrity candidate seemed to have an easier route into the White House than a party regular. So in 1848, they nominated General Zachary Taylor, a recent hero of battlefields in the Mexican-American War. Despite his lack of solid political principles or any apparent passion for the job, just 2 years earlier, he'd said with apparent sincerity, "I am not and never shall be an aspirant for that honor." Taylor won the election over Democratic candidate Lewis Cass. In July 1850, he became the second straight Whig general to president who couldn't make it to the next election alive. Vice President Millard Fillmore took his place. Fillmore had risen to prominence in New York's anti-Mason party dedicated to exposing and opposing Freemason fraternal organizations, but switched allegiance to the Whigs in the 1830s. In the first year and a half of the administration, inter-party rivals had manipulated Taylor better than Fillmore did, leaving him little to do but preside over the Senate and stew over his fate in a useless job. But as president, he was prepared to avenge perceived slights. Ahead of their expected dismissal, all the cabinet members whom Fillard had inherited from Taylor offered their resignations, which were quickly accepted by the new president. He asked them to remain in place for 1 month. They agreed to stay for 1 week. Fillmore would proceed to fire more previous political appointees than any of his successors had. More than half of those at the State Department, for example, had to find new jobs. The biggest development during Fillmore's presidency was the Compromise of 1850. This set of bills admitted California to the Union as a free state, allowed the organization of the Utah and New Mexico territories without reference to slavery, resolved both the Texas state boundary and the Lone Star State's remaining debt, abolished the slave trade in the District of Columbia, and reaffirmed the fugitive slave law that required the returning of slaves escaped across state lines. Fillmore signed each bill, believing this package of measures had fixed what he considered an annoying issue that kept getting in the way of his other priorities. The compromise bills delayed a war between the states, but at a cost. They not only perpetuated slavery, but split the Whigs further apart, as most Northerners refused to abide by the fugitive slave law. Congressional elections in November 1850 increased the Democratic opposition's majorities in both the House and the Senate. The rest of the president's term was so bad that the highlight might have been the start of Commodore Matthew Perry's voyage to Japan to open that country to American trade, even though he didn't arrive until Fillmore left office. Not long after rising to become the chief executive, Fillmore declared he wouldn't run again in the 1852 election. He reiterated that in 1851. But the trappings of presidential power and the pleas of his remaining party faithful convinced him to retract that pledge and make a late entry into the field of candidates. He portrayed his about-face as a noble personal sacrifice for the good of the party and the country. And during the spring of that election year, 8 Whig state conventions endorsed him. As delegates gathered for what a leading historian of the era calls the longest, most rancorous, and most debilitating Whig National Convention ever to meet, the first tally had Fillmore in the lead. How to get rid of a president.
Hey, if you like the rants that I open the show with every day, they're typically published over at HartmanReport.com. Check it out. So MAGA Mike and the Republicans want a religious test for people running for public office. They want to know that you are sufficiently Christian to be worthy of being elected. Right. MAGA Mike is one of these 7 mountain evangelicals. There are 7 domains where these dominionists believe that we need to have religion completely take them over. Education, religion, family, business, government and military, arts and entertainment, and the media. Seriously. This is not what Jesus was preaching when he said, give unto Caesar what is Caesar and unto God what is God's. This is the opposite, in fact, of what Jesus was teaching. It's the opposite of Matthew 25, where Jesus said the only way to get to heaven is by feeding the hungry, healing the sick, helping the poor. This is counter-Christian, anti-Christian, in fact. In fact, I think you could say it is the Antichrist's work. There's a piece about it over at HartmannReport.com. Check it out. 5 minutes back, picking up your calls here. John in DeLand, Florida. Am I saying that right?
Yes, sir, DeLand. Quick question for you, and I came up with the second one while I was on hold. I hope you got time for. The first one is, I heard you say to call your state representative how important it is. After 100 calls to Mike Johnson and probably 25 other representatives, do you really think it does anything? Do you think, is there really anybody listening to them?
Yes. Yeah, every single member of the House of Representatives has somebody who answers the phone and keeps a list of every call. They don't, convey your exact words to the member of Congress, but they will, at the end of the day, they'll come in and say, okay, we got 70 calls today. 47 of them said give money to Ukraine, and 22 of them said don't give money to Ukraine, and 5 of them were incoherent or whatever. I mean, they create a little spreadsheet, and they just, and here's the number of people who called about abortion, and here's the number of people who called about Ukraine, here's the number of people who called about, fill in the blank, right? They do that, and public opinion does change, generally speaking, does change the behavior of politicians if it's strong enough. For Republicans, of course, they're balancing the outrage of the voters with the amount of money that their donors will use to carpet bomb the districts with television advertising to make those voters forget how outraged they are. So, it can be a challenge, particularly with somebody like Speaker Mike, Moscow Mike Johnson, who's in a very safe seat in Louisiana. He's not going to lose his seat any day soon, and probably never. But nonetheless, it's worth doing. It's absolutely worth doing, John.
Okay, and then real quick, did something change in the past year? Because now I'm seeing on my cell phone when calls come in, I'm getting an actual thing across my phone that says telemarketer. And it don't matter how many times you block it, report it as spam, or whatever you're doing when you push that button on your phone to block it, it still comes through. It's the same, and it says telemarketer. I mean, this is new.
Yeah, this is something that your phone company is doing as a favor to you, and they do it based on complaints that they get and calling patterns that they see. And in fact, here, here in Portland, and of course, this is not a regional thing because all the phone companies most all of the phone companies now are national, they're not regional. But the phone company that I use, instead of saying telemarketer, it says scam likely. That's the message I'm getting. So yeah.
Well, thank you, sir.
Okay, good talking to you, John. Thank you very much for the call. James in Arlington, Texas. Hey, James, what's on your mind today?
Yeah, I was thinking, and before the Civil War, when slavery was still legal, and it was against the law to assist a slave that's trying to escape from slavery, even in a free state, which was the Dred Scott decision, you had abolitionists like John Brown, who helped traffic the slaves in the Underground Railroad, and they were afraid of the law was against that. And they actually conducted those activities at gunpoint, so that they were not stopped from doing it, even by the law. The law would go there and attempt to bring back a slave that has escaped, and the abolitionists would stop them. I want to know, in today's day, why that attitude doesn't exist around the issue of abortion. There's a lot of fear about assisting a woman to get an abortion because of the law. In other words, the doctor's afraid they can do it. People are afraid to escort a woman who needs an escortion across the state line because that's illegal. It would seem to me that there's a certain lack of bravery in order to assist. There's another example.
I can guarantee you, as we are speaking, that there are Underground Railroad equivalents emerging in red states for women who need abortions.
Okay.
They're just, nobody's out there waving a flag saying, "Here I am," because that brings instant prosecution. But this was a very real thing up until the Brown v. Board decision. There were networks here in the United States that would fly you into Mexico or fly you to various European countries where abortion was still legal if you had the money. So no, it's got to be going on. I mean, I have no specific evidence of it, but it can't not be happening.
No, I agree with that. Also, it seems to me the doctors could be taken a better stand.
Well, the doctors are voting with their feet. I mean, the entire state of Idaho is down to 5 ob-gyns right now.
Yeah, I know. I'm in Texas, so I know about the dearth of medical facilities, including abortions.
Yeah. Yep. But, James, thank you for the call.
We need more of that.
People will find a way. Right? I mean, this is just like human nature 101. Thanks, James, for the call. Rob in New Orleans. Hey, Rob, we were just speaking of New Orleans. What's on your mind?
Hey, Tom, it's Rob, your #1 Louisiana fan.
Thank you.
Interesting aside about Joe Namath anticipating problems with his brain from all of his football injuries. He committed himself to a very intensive hyperbaric oxygen therapy regime. They would try getting that on Medicare.
Oh, really? When was that?
I just read about it. He saw a scan in his brain, and he committed to HBOT. And after multiple treatments, that gray area in his brain was eliminated, he said.
And this is recently?
I've read the article, I'm sure, within the last year.
Huh, interesting. So they're doing hyperbaric oxygen for old people to restore their brains? That's a new one on me.
He was, I guess, anticipating CET, the injuries that football players develop.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Or is that cranial traumatic,
I read a lot of,
whatever it is, encephalitis?
Right. And two, I read a lot of news sites, and WSWS.org, World Socialist website, has a very interesting interpretation of Putin's response to Tucker's questions, which I thought was interesting, regardless of their politics. Three.
Well, hang on just a second. What was their take?
Just that he was like a fellow imperialist. That he wants to be friends with the other oligarchs in the West, and he's not serving the Russian people as well as he could, kind of basically.
Weird.
And regardless of the criticism of Tucker, I'd like to see more interviews with countries we have conflicts with. We've been in conflict with Iraq for 35 years, and I've never seen an Iraqi politician or journalist on Morning Joe or any of these other shows talking about their society.
It's because these are not free societies. So the people, if you were to interview those people, you're either going to get BS out of them, or you're going to get meaningless drivel from them. Witness the interview with Putin.
I would love, just as a citizen, to be able to go on some type of website where I can just talk to a Russian. With the internet's that connected, Louisiana. We've got, I'm taking some inspiration from you. We've got 200,000 children food insecure. We've got 500,000 diabetics. I'm starting a new Louisiana green organization promoting dynamic agroecology and the sweet potato as the basis of food security and metabolic health. I'll keep you posted on that.
Sweet potatoes are very healthy. They're high in vitamin A.
So, and also we've got this new crazy MAGA governor whose first initiative is, let's find additional ways to execute people.
Yeah.
And I'm suggesting, since they're evangelical Christians, we get Elon Musk to develop a robot to stone people. And
I don't get it, Rob. Here in Oregon, I can, if I have 2 doctors who certify that I'm going to be dead in the next 6 months and I'm in pain, I can get a prescription for a little bottle of orange liquid. It's probably phenobarbital that I could drink and just lay down and go to sleep and never wake up. I don't know why, if they've got to kill people, and frankly, I'm totally opposed to it, but if they have to kill people, why don't they just give them that same little bottle of phenobarbital and let them fall asleep and die? I mean, why? I get it. It's all about, vengeance, and we want to see them in pain, and we want to see them writhing. Rob, thank you for the call. It's kind of a sad commentary on America, or at least on those states, those red states that still, well, it's not all red states. We still have the death penalty here in Oregon. Those states that still have the death penalty. It's barbaric. It's 45 minutes past the hour. I'll be back with more of your calls in just a moment.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Talk media for the sane among us. I'll be back with your calls in just a second. And welcome back, Mary in Chicago. Hey, Mary, what's on your mind today?
Yes, I just those people should be careful what they ask for, because if they outlaw abortion in certain states, either medical students are not going into obsession, or they're leaving the state completely.
Yeah, this is, like I said a few minutes ago, Idaho, I believe, is down to 5 obstetricians. The doctors are just fleeing the state because they don't want to be confronted with a complex pregnancy that they can't, if they have to, that they can't abort.
Yes. So if someone has a normal pregnancy and they need, regular, they can't get it.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Mary, thank you. Thank you for your excellent point. Shirley in Mesa, Arizona. Hey, Shirley, what's on your mind today?
Well, the other day you mentioned there were 12 or so, I think, representatives talking about retiring. They're not going to run again. Mm-hmm. And I'm saying, can't we get to those people and convince them to do the right thing and resign right now?
Apparently not. I guarantee you they're getting pressure to do that.
It would just solve so many things. We can't let this Michael person.
I don't know if it would impact their pension. I mean, maybe there's some financial reason to stay in there until the end of the term.
Oh, come on, they're all freaking millionaires.
Yeah. I don't know the details, frankly. But I think this election is going to flip the House back to the Democrats. All the signs are there.
I believe that. But we're talking shutdown in 2 weeks.
I know.
Because these people are just jerks.
I know. Which may help the Democrats too. I'm not an advocate for it. I don't want the damage to be done to America. I get the math on this thing from the Republicans' point of view. Yeah.
Oh well.
Yep. There you go. All right.
It's my dream.
Okay. Thank you, Shirley. Stephen in Kula, Hawaii. Hey, Stephen, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. With all these Medicare Advantage ads we're bombarded with, is there some way that the federal government, the Center for Medicare Services, HSS, or somebody could do PSAs to counter that and talk about real Medicare, maybe have you or Alex Lawson or...
Yeah, they don't have a budget for it, Stephen.
Potter. What's that?
They don't have a budget for it.
But couldn't they do PSAs that would be free?
They'd have to work it out with somebody like the Ad Council, and I can virtually guarantee you that if they started talking to the Ad Council about doing ads for real Medicare, that the Medicare Advantage providers would, raise holy hell about it.
Probably. I'd be willing to have $1 raise on my Medicare to help pay for it.
Yeah, me too. I'd be willing to do the ads for free. I mean, it's But I've never seen that, and I'm not expecting it. I think the bigger issue right now is, Medicare is sending out this brochure every year with all these Medicare Advantage plans on it, and Medicare Advantage is all over the Medicare website, and they need to get rid of that stuff. They just need to get rid of it. It's competition. It's damaging America. Stephen, thank you for the call. I totally agree. Yeah, thank you, and thanks for watching us on Free Speech TV there in Hawaii. It's 49 minutes past the hour. I'll be back with you in 60 seconds, and we'll continue picking up your calls. Stay with us. Help support progressive radio. If you're listening to us on a commercial station, call their advertisers and let them know you're listening. If you're listening to us on Pacifica, one of our many nonprofit stations, please support them when they do their fundraising drives. Thanks for supporting progressive talk radio, and tag you're it. So back in 1933, when Franklin Roosevelt became president, we were in the depths of the Great Depression. He raised the top income tax rate on billionaires from 25% to 90%. The ultra-rich were screaming, and here's what he had to say.
A number of my friends who belong in the very high upper brackets have suggested to me on several occasions of late that if I am re-elected president, they will have to move to some other nation because of high taxes here. Now, I will miss them very much.
He just took it right to them, right? Now, what came out of that was the world's largest and fastest growing and first major middle class. We can do this again. We just have to raise taxes on rich people. It's pretty straightforward. There's a whole article about it over at HartmannReport.com. Check it out. 51 minutes past the hour, picking up your calls here. Jeff in Portland. Hey, Jeff, what's up?
How you doing, Tom?
Good.
To talk to you. What's on my mind is campaign strategy. I recall in 2010 when Democrats kind of hid from Obama because of reactions to Obamacare, and it cost us. And I've been involved in strategic planning exercises for multi-hundred-million-dollar corporations where we really pull together cohesively. And why isn't the president not only asking for the vote for president, but Democrats up and down the ticket so that we can accomplish the things that everybody wants, including Republicans? You know, healthcare, education, abortion rights, voting rights, sensible gun measures, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It just seems like we're playing whack-a-mole with our strategy, which means there is no cohesive strategy. And I would just like to get your thoughts on it.
Yeah. I get what you're saying, Jeff. I think it's important to keep in mind that it is February, and the campaign season really does not begin until after Labor Day, until after the end of the summer. So I fully expect what you're calling for to be happening in September, October, and November. I just, you know, they're keeping their powder dry for right now. You have to save your money for that, you know, basically 10, 12-week stretch leading up to the election. So
that makes sense.
The name of the game right now is what's called earned media, which is, you know, get on the news. So,
right.
All righty.
And get some money. Get some money in your pocket.
There you go. Good talking to you, Jeff. Thank you. David in North Miami Beach, Florida. Hey, David, what's on your mind today?
Hey, y'all. Just want to remind you, when it comes to Putin's enemies, they love to go after brothers, whether it's Alexander Vindman and his brother, or now Navalny and his brother.
Yep.
But now that Back to the Future is a musical, I wanted to remind you that, remember, going after Trump, you're going after the myth as much as the man. People forget that the villain Biff was based on Trump, especially the alternate Biff, who had actual wealth and power.
That's right, yeah. Was it the screenwriter who knew Trump or who lived in New York? I mean, that story's been around for a while.
I know what you know, but that sounds about right. Yeah, so in our analogy, President Trump was alt-Biff with actual power. We were up against, powerless Biff before his election, and But now we have Biden as our George McFly, who may not be as glamorous, but gets stuff done that has to be done.
Yeah.
But if the worst happens and the Alabama fetus as person comes true, I hope Biden threatens a basic income so that mothers are able to claim an extra basic income on behalf of their fetus, and we'll have the matriarchy that Lynn Cheney feared. I hope Biden can use that as a threat.
I get it. There's 16 different ways to strategize this, but that's a good one. David, thank you. Thank you very much. Leslie in Lorain, Ohio. Hey, Leslie, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. Maybe this was a question maybe I should have called in tomorrow, but just thinking about the situation in Ukraine and how they can defend themselves. And I remember about 6-8 months ago, there was the talk about them needing the equipment to have their own air defense system.
Right.
And the fact was they didn't have any pilots that were capable of flying the planes that other countries had offered to loan them.
Right.
So what has happened to that now? Since they're running low on ammunition, what's going on over there, and what has happened to that program, I wonder?
Yeah, that's a good question for a Russia expert, or for our war correspondent tomorrow, Phil Ittner.
Yeah.
Because I haven't heard anything about that in at least a month. My understanding is at the time, and you're right, this was several months ago, that at the time we had a number of these Ukrainian pilots who were training outside of Ukraine. They were training in Sweden. I understand some of them were actually training in the United States. But I would guess that kind of thing would be on the QT, because they wouldn't want to notify the Russian assassins where these people are.
That's true. Yeah.
So
That's
probably
true,
what we're going to probably someday we're going to wake up to a news report that an F-35 being flown by a Ukrainian Air Force pilot just blew up a Russian battalion or something. It's
yeah. Well, it sure seems like they could use them about now.
You betcha. I don't know what the delay has been. A bunch of European countries now. This came out of this Munich security meeting that they had last week. Munich 2024, and was it Finland or Denmark? I think it was Finland said that they're going to donate 100% of their artillery shells to Ukraine because the situation is so dire. But these NATO countries and European countries are in general are just they're starting to flip out. They're getting very, very concerned about the fact that Medvedev and Putin's generals are talking about going after Poland and Latvia and Lithuania and Estonia, and it's a legitimate fear. I absolutely think he is. In fact, I think he was telegraphing an attack on Poland to Tucker Carlson. And it wouldn't surprise me if Putin actually wants World War III. I think he thinks that World War II was a glorious moment for Russia. Leslie, I got to run, but thank you for the call. We'll be right back with Debbie Hines.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
In addition to bringing you the Thom Hartmann program here on Free Speech TV and Video Media Online, we also have a whole set of ways you can interact with us and tools you can use to spread the word about the importance of democracy and the threats to it in our republic. First, there's your daily homework. Sue Nethercutt puts together a daily email newsletter that has a link to every story I discuss on the air, so you can find my sources and you can share them with your friends. It's free and you can sign up at ThomHartmann.com. Second, I publish my daily take every day over at the HartmannReport.com website. That's also free if you want the daily 5 days a week rant in your inbox. No ads either. Third, we have the podcasts. There's the free 1-hour version of our daily show that's advertising supported. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts normally. And then there's also the podcast of the entire 3-hour show with no advertisements, and that's available by subscription over at ThomHartmann.com. So check them all out at ThomHartmann.com and HartmannReport.com.
We say fight back!
Today is How to Get Rid of a President by David Priess. And this is from the chapter Rejected by the Party, starting on page 12, kind of mid-chapter. Presidents need not be thrown out on the polls, at the polls on Election Day to find themselves dislodged from the White House. History shows us that a chief executive's own political allies can remove that incumbent when they perceive him as unpopular or unfit. Refusing to nominate a president for a second term, or better yet, getting the incumbent to realize that he should walk away before it becomes an embarrassing vote at the convention, does bring the party significant pain. But many politicians have calculated that discarding their own party's toxic president by internal action is better than waiting for the voters to do it. This dynamic remained absent for the first half century or so of American politics. George Washington, who didn't represent any formal party, set a precedent by stepping away from re-election after 2 terms. Successor after successor followed suit, keeping the support of their parties until they left office after 8 years. Jefferson, Madison, Monroe, and Jackson lost the next election, both Adamses and Van Buren, or met the Grim Reaper, Harrison. John Tyler, if only in this one respect, was a trendsetter. He began a 6-president cascade of men who failed to appear on their party's ballot in the general election after their first term. One, Zachary Taylor, literally had no choice. Like Harrison, he died in office. The others, by staying alive through their 4-year terms, could have carried their party's banners again on Election Day. Not one did, as national agonizing over slavery and other tensions within each of the major parties made it difficult for any president to build and sustain a governing coalition. Of those 5 chief executives, only James Polk left with a solid reputation and a ledger of successes. He'd told Democrats upon his nomination in 1844, "I shall enter upon the discharge of the high and solemn duties of the office with the settled purpose of not being a candidate for re-election." And he stayed true to his word. It was just as well. Only 3 months after what would have been his second inauguration, he died at the age of 53. The 3 presidents who followed Polk, the forgettable series of Millard Fillmore, Franklin Pierce, and James Buchanan, shared 3 characteristics. First, historians routinely rank them among the nation's worst presidents. Second, and related to that, they took no responsibility for resolving the national moral failure of slavery. And third, no matter how they had attained office, they, like future presidents Chester Arthur and Lyndon Johnson, found themselves spurned by their own parties. The Whigs had learned in 1840 that a celebrity candidate seemed to have an easier route into the White House than a party regular. So in 1848, they nominated General Zachary Taylor, a recent hero of battlefields in the Mexican-American War. Despite his lack of solid political principles or any apparent passion for the job, just 2 years earlier he'd said with apparent sincerity, "I am not and never shall be an aspirant for that honor," Taylor won the election over Democratic candidate Lewis Cass. In July 1850, he became the second straight Whig general to president who couldn't make it to the next election alive. Vice President Millard Fillmore took his place. Fillmore had risen to prominence in New York's anti-Mason party dedicated to exposing and opposing Freemason fraternal organizations, but switched allegiance to the Whigs in the 1830s. In the first year and a half of the administration, inter-party rivals had manipulated Taylor better than Fillmore did, leaving him little to do but preside over the Senate and stew over his fate in a useless job. But as president, he was prepared to avenge perceived slights. Ahead of their expected dismissal, all the cabinet members whom Fillard had inherited from Taylor offered their resignations, which were quickly accepted by the new president. He asked them to remain in place for 1 month. They agreed to stay for 1 week. Fillmore would proceed to fire more previous political appointees than any of his successors had. More than half of those at the State Department, for example, had to find new jobs. The biggest development during Fillmore's presidency was the Compromise of 1850. This set of bills admitted California to the Union as a free state, allowed the organization of the Utah and New Mexico territories without reference to slavery, resolved both the Texas state boundary and the Lone Star State's remaining debt, abolished the slave trade in the District of Columbia, and reaffirmed the fugitive slave law that required the returning of slaves escaped across state lines. Fillmore signed each bill, believing this package of measures had fixed what he considered an annoying issue that kept getting in the way of his other priorities. The compromise bills delayed a war between the states, but at a cost. They not only perpetuated slavery, but split the Whigs further apart, as most Northerners refused to abide by the fugitive slave law. congressional elections in November 1850 increased the Democratic opposition's majorities in both the House and the Senate. The rest of the president's term was so bad that the highlight might have been the start of Commodore Matthew Perry's voyage to Japan to open that country to American trade, even though he didn't arrive until Fillmore left office. Not long after rising to become the chief executive, Fillmore declared he wouldn't run again in the 1852 election. He reiterated that in 1851. But the trappings of presidential power and the pleas of his remaining party faithful convinced him to retract that pledge and make a late entry into the field of candidates. He portrayed his about face as a noble personal sacrifice for the good of the party and the country. And during the spring of that election year, 8 Whig state conventions endorsed him. As delegates gathered for what a leading historian of the era calls the longest, most rancorous, and most debilitating Whig national convention ever to meet, the first tally had Fillmore in the lead. How to get rid of a president.
Warren might be perceived as ideologically similar to Bernie, but her the book by Ari Rabenhoft, the subhead On the Road with Bernie Sanders.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome to the third hour of our program. Elizabeth Warren is quite upset. You probably heard about this. In fact, NPR did an amazing fluff piece this morning on this merger between Capital One and Discover Financial, two major credit card issuers that have their own cards, and they want to merge and then give MasterCard and Visa a run for their money. Senator Elizabeth Warren is out saying this will lead to higher credit card fees and higher costs for cardholders because it's just reducing the amount of competition in the marketplace. This, ever since 1983, when Ronald Reagan ordered the Department of Justice, the Securities and Exchange Commission, and the Federal Trade Commission to stop enforcing our antitrust laws, the first president to actually start enforcing our antitrust laws was Joe Biden. He's going after Google right now. He's going after several of the big internet companies. And now this is a $35 billion takeover. The acquisition, Elizabeth Warren says, quote, threatens our financial stability, reduces competition, and would increase fees and credit costs for American families. The Wall Street deal is dangerous and will harm working people. Regulators must block it immediately. But this is what's going on. In fact, the guy on NPR this morning was going on about how, well, they'll get more efficient, right? You don't need 2 accounting departments. You don't need 2 sales departments. You don't need 2 advertising departments. You can consolidate that all into one. So, okay, we get these 2 giant companies. They merge. They lay off 10, 20, 30,000 employees. Isn't that wonderful for the economy? And now, they have no incentive to lower costs and things like that because they don't have any serious competition other than MasterCard and Visa, which are already functionally a monopoly. So now we have a triopoly here. And it's just not a good thing. I am hopeful that the Biden administration will respond to this. Also, our geeky science for the day, AccuWeather is concerned, shall we say. Sounding alarm bells is the actual phrase they used. With the Atlantic, this is from AccuWeather. This is from their news site. It's an article by Brian Latta. He's the meteorologist and staff writer for AccuWeather. He says, the Atlantic hurricane season does not officially start until June, but there are already serious and growing concerns about the impending season. There are 2 key factors. One, we are still in El Nino, which means more moisture in the air, right? But we probably, in the middle of the summer, will transition to a La Nina, which is the drier stuff on the West Coast here, but it typically leads to more tropical storms and hurricanes in the Atlantic due to reduced wind shear or disruptive high winds in the atmosphere. So get ready for kind of the worst of all worlds, I guess is what they're predicting this year. Again, quoting from, this is AccuWeather long-range expert Paul Pastelok. He said the second half of the hurricane season is likely to be very active as conditions are more favorable for tropical systems. He notes that there is a risk for a system to develop before the official start of the hurricane season on June 1st. 7 of the last 10 years, in fact, we've had a hurricane come before the official start of the hurricane season, June 1st. And that's because warm water is fuel for hurricanes. And at the end of January, the water temperatures in the region, the MDR, the main development region where hurricanes start, were a staggering 65% higher than the next closest year. This is extraordinarily dangerous. He said, Pastelok said, we expect the Gulf Coast, especially the Texas coast, will be at a higher risk for direct impacts from a tropical storm this year. But will Greg Abbott do anything about fossil fuels? No, of course not. The fossil fuel industry owns him. Meanwhile, the Biden-Harris campaign has put out a notice of Project 2025 Team Trump plotting to rip away Americans' health care. And they point out this new report in Politico. We just had a record 21.3 million people sign up for the Affordable Care Act. But Republicans in half a dozen states have a request for a second Trump administration require low-income adults to work for free government health care. In places like Idaho, Missouri, and South Dakota, Republican officials are laying the groundwork. The Trump administration authorized 13 states to tie work requirements to Medicaid. The Supreme Court added, has gone along with this. So grim stuff. Meanwhile, House Republicans are taking a 2-week vacation as they put Putin ahead of Ukraine or the United States. I just don't get how Moscow Mike survives this. I mean, what am I missing? This guy adjourns Congress so that nobody can run a discharge petition through Congress to get aid to Ukraine. He adjourns. He says nobody can do anything. How does he survive this? This is such a naked, bowing down and kissing Putin's shoes. How is it not so clear to everybody in the United States that Moscow Mike is doing what Putin wants, and he's doing it because Donald Trump has to do what Putin wants because Putin owns him? I mean, what am I missing here? And look at some of these headlines. I mean, these are just crazy. This is from Huffington Post. House GOP impeaches DHS Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas just to help Trump. Politico. As Republicans accuse Mayorkas of grossly mishandling the border, Johnson is actively refusing to consider the Senate's bipartisan deal to ramp up border security. CNN. The border compromise would represent a dramatic change of immigration law on lines many Republicans have long supported. The Mayorkas impeachment effort will have zero practical impact on the crisis at the southern border. New York Times, the headline, Republicans against border enforcement. Rolling Stone, Border Patrol sports strong immigration deal, Republicans don't care. You get this? It's like, Donald Trump doesn't care what's best for America. He cares what's best for Donald Trump. Period, full stop. CNN, Trump, who is hoping to make immigration a key plank of his presidential campaign, has suggested on Truth Social that approving additional resources for the border would make Republicans look bad. Really? This is where we've come to? It's incredible. Mike Johnson, our immigration system is broken. Reforming that system is a job for Congress. That was before he talked to Donald Trump. Mike Johnson, the founders of this country warned us against single-party impeachment because they feared it would bitterly and perhaps irreparably divide our country. That was before Mike Johnson talked to Donald Trump. Johnson, I think it's past time to secure the border. That was before he spoke with Donald Trump. I mean, when you look at what's going on here, and then, how Tom Suozzi just played this in the New York 3 race, where he came out and he said, yeah, I'm all in favor of securing the border, but the Republicans won't vote for it, and my Republican opponent, says she wouldn't vote for it because she's going to do whatever Donald Trump wants. And he wins by 8 points in a district that the Republican had won, George Santos, had won by 8 points just, a year earlier. I have a feeling, a very, very strong feeling, this is going to devastate Republican candidates as they're going into the election. Now, I could be wrong, and you know, I realize conventional wisdom is that anything you do 9 months before an election doesn't matter to the election because people have short memories, and most people aren't even paying attention. Only about 10 to 15% of Americans are even paying attention to politics right now. Most of them, by the way, are listening to Fox News or right-wing hate radio. But I think that more Americans are paying attention than conventional wisdom dictates. And I think it's because this is just such an unusual era where we've got a puppet of a foreign government actively campaigning for president of the United States in order to keep himself out of prison. Can you imagine how Joe Biden would be doing right now if he had been convicted of raping somebody? If he had been convicted of fraud? I mean, they're foaming at the mouth over an alleged $5 million that didn't even exist.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
And Trump takes home billions while he's in the White House. He took millions of dollars from China. We still don't know what for. He says it was for services rendered. What the hell? And welcome back. Let's see who's been sitting on hold here the longest. Charles in Dallas, Texas. Hey, Charles, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom, can you hear me?
Just fine.
Good. Okay, man. Don't forget, real quick. God, let me be like Mars and run like a wild man.
Morris is a great role model.
He is. Okay, I got my stuff written. Okay, don't forget Steve Mnuchin. For all the conservatives out there who have forgotten, please allow me to remind you that Steve Mnuchin, also Secretary of Treasury under Donald Trump, also got $1 billion from the Middle East.
Yep.
Don't forget, we always talk about Jared Kushner and Ivanka and the money they got from China and from the Middle East. But don't forget, it was such a grip. Steve Mnuchin also got $1
And
billion.
there's a good question as to why, Charles. I'm betting or guessing that Mnuchin was actually the brains behind the Abraham Accords. Probably, you know, Jared was the front man because he was he had the Trump name, but that Mnuchin actually probably did the work, and that's why they rewarded him with $1 billion. What do you think, Charles?
I think you're right. Let me move, because my time is limited, because you're the most valuable progressive talk show host in America, so let me run.
Okay.
I heard your rant. I totally agree with you. Yeah. I would much rather send money to Ukraine than to send any of my 3 grandsons to Ukraine.
Yep.
The weaponry.
At the end of the day, that's the choice.
I mean, I don't understand how that's a hard choice. Yep. You conservatives, you love to call in and fight with Tom. Call in and explain to me why. How is it a choice? Do we send money or do we send our sons and daughters, our grandchildren? I got all my grandchildren. I love every one of my boys. If all grandsons, we could not buy a granddaughter. All of them are grandboys. I'd much rather send money. All right, number 2, real quick. I live in Texas, too, because you have a certain caller. He loves to call in from Austin. His name rhymes with silly, but I'm not going to use his name because you like your show to be open to everybody.
Okay.
And I live in Texas since 1967, and they love to talk about states' rights, and they love to talk about we don't like socialism. But yet, you know what? Texas, Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, they get more money from the federal government. The federal government that Grover Norquist said, I want to make it so small I can drown it in the bathtub. That same federal government, if it wasn't for that federal government, you couldn't wipe your behind, Texas, Arkansas, Tennessee, Georgia, Florida. You could not do it. All southern states are welfare states. Now, conservatives, please call in and talk about that. Last of all, we believe in states' rights until it's Colorado. And Republicans, not Democrats, Republicans say, Donald Trump, you're an insurrectionist. You don't belong on our ballot. Then what do? You run to the federal government, the same one that you say you hate big government. Then you believe in states' rights until you don't get the judicial outcome that you want. Then you run to that same federal government that you say you want to make smaller and smaller. Then you want to run to them. Yeah. I'm tired of your hypocrisy.
Yeah, these people are world-class hypocrites. They really are, Charles.
They're world-class hypocrites. Tom, hey, man, I love your show. I listen to you almost every day. Thank you for letting me get my rant in. But one more time, conservatives, please call in. Blood or bullets? Which one do you want to send? You want to send your children, or do you want to send money?
There you go.
Say that to Martin Taylor Greene. Talk to you later, Tom. God bless you.
Thanks a lot, Charles. Thank you. It's 19. That was sweet. It's 19 minutes past the hour. We'll be right back with more of your calls and the news of the day right after this. Stay with us. Missed my opening rant today? It's usually published over at HartmannReport.com, where you can read it and share it with your friends for free. Check it out, HartmannReport.com. Back in 2010, when Viktor Orban took over the Fidesz party in Hungary, that party was sort of like the Republican Party. It was just a conventional conservative European political party. And he has turned it into a neo-fascist powerhouse. He pushed through he altered the nation's constitution to push through what we would call gerrymandering and voter suppression so that his party will always win. He campaigned on building a wall. Build a wall was literally one of his campaign slogans, and he did build a wall across the southern border of Hungary to keep out Syrian refugees who were fleeing the violence when Russia was bombing that country. His other two campaign slogans were, and I quote, "Restore Christian purity and make Hungary great again." Seriously, back in 2010, 6 years before Trump. There's an amazing backstory about how Viktor Orban is being cloned, essentially, in the GOP. You can find the article over at HartmannReport.com. Check it out. "21 minutes past the hour, and let's pick up your calls and see what's on your mind today." Roosevelt in Chicago. Hey, Roosevelt, what's up?
Hi, Tom.
Hey.
I wanted to mention African Heritage Month Black historical fact, which is that 59 years ago on this date, Malcolm X was assassinated.
Oh, really? Thank you for that.
Yeah. February 21st, 1965.
Yeah. America lost not only a great and passionate leader for civil rights, but also a genuine intellectual.
Yes, I agree. Now, the other day I was mentioning this, but the commercial came in, and I think it's kind of important that back in 2014, the Obama administration negotiated regulation of nuclear arms production with Russia, and the next administration after the Obama administration encouraged Russia not to stick to the agreement, and they began stepping up production. So did China. Now, during the Trump administration, there were 5 balloons from China that flew over the western part of the United States and focused on that. And during the Biden administration, there were 2 such balloons.
Mm-hmm.
In June of 2022, the United States Air Force announced that $1.4 trillion would be used to renovate land-based nuclear intercontinental missiles. And these are mostly located, according to Scientific American, December of 2023, in Colorado, Nebraska, Nevada, Montana, and they are in 300 to 400 different silos. Now, since these balloons flew over that area, we know China knows about these.
Presumably.
And we also know Russia knows about these silos also.
Well, they've also got satellites. They can take pictures.
Right. And so the scientists, and the nuclear scientists and the military term these land-based silos sacrifice zones. Now, to me, that's scary.
Mm.
If that were ground zero, then the rest of the country would suffer from radiation fallout, basically. But, these are things that I think people should be aware of and try to prepare for if they can.
Yeah, I'm with you, Roosevelt. And the balloons story, thank you for bringing that up. You'll recall when during the Biden administration, when the word first came out that a Chinese spy balloon was going over the United States, instantly Republicans came out and said, we got to politicize this. We got to figure out anything in the news we can use to beat up Joe Biden, to beat up the Biden administration, we're going to use. And so they immediately started going, oh, this wouldn't have happened under Trump. This is, Trump was tough on China, even though Trump took millions of dollars from China for, quote, services rendered, which we never learned what the services were. But they said, oh, this never would have happened under Trump. And then, about 3 weeks later, word came out that, as you said, 5 of these balloons had gone over the United States during the Trump administration, and Donald Trump had done absolutely nothing about it because that's Donald Trump. Excellent points all, Roosevelt. Thank you so much for sharing those. Good to hear from you. Ann in Dutchess County, New York. Hey, Ann, what's on your mind today?
Hi. So I was getting new countertops, and I had a couple of people come in to measure and give me quotes. And this one guy, it was obvious he was a MAGA. So he was saying how Donald Trump has been set up by Biden, and that Biden, picked judges that would indict him and, bribe people to be against him and Taylor Swift, and they conspired to win the Super Bowl, blah, 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 blah. He's going on and on and on about this. So I said, okay. So I said, so Biden did that? And he said, yeah. I said, so why is it you think he's senile?
Oh, that's a good one.
That seems pretty smart to me.
That's a good one.
Needless to say, he didn't get my job.
Yeah. Good on you, Ann. That's a great story.
Bye-bye.
Okay, thanks a lot for calling and sharing it. Greg in Casper, Wyoming. Hey, Greg, what's on your mind?
I was wanting to say, if people would vote Trump, Putin, and I like to combine the names because they really go together and people get a little excited when you say that word. And I would also like to compliment Republicans on their new bipartisan coalition of bigots and big business.
The Russ-publicans, as in Russian publicans?
Uh-huh.
And Trump Putin. Yeah, you can't quite make that into a Trumpkin or something like that, but
No, you really can't, but it's better than Democrats, or at least it's good.
Yeah.
It's kind of a way to turn it around, but I would sure like to see it on national headlines.
They have been slurring our party since the 40s, or since the 50s, since 1957, when Joe McCarthy came up with his instruction to never call it the Democratic Party, because that sounds too nice. That sounds democratic. Call it the Democrat Party with an emphasis on the rat. And ever since then, Fox News, this is their religion. That's all. They never say Democratic Party. Greg, thank you for the call. That's more nicknames for Republicans. There you go. It's 27 minutes past the hour. I'll be picking up your phone calls on the other side of this break. Stay with us.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Speaking the truth, Donald Trump would really rather you don't know. I'll be right back with you. Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is The Recurring Crises of American Democracy, 4 Threats. I think 4 Threats is the actual title, by Susan Bettler and Robert C. Lieberman. And this is from my well-dog-eared copy. I have read this book cover to cover. It's an amazing book. This is from the introduction. When the president used his power to target immigrants, the press, and his political opponents, the sheer overreach of his actions shocked many citizens. Tensions among the nation's political leaders had been escalating for years. Embroiled in one intense conflict after another, both sides had grown increasingly distrustful of each other. Every action by one camp provoked a greater counter-reaction from the other, sometimes straining the limits of the Constitution. Fights and mob violence followed. Leaders of the dominant party grew convinced that their only hope for fixing the government was to do everything possible to weaken their opponents and silence dissent. The president signed into law provisions that made it more difficult for immigrants, who tended to support the opposition, to attain citizenship, and mandated the deportation of those who were deemed dangerous or who came from, quote, hostile, end quote, nations. He then put his pen to a law that would allow for the prosecution of those who openly criticized his administration, such as newspaper publishers. The year just described was not 2017 or 2018. Rather, it was 1798, when President John Adams signed the Alien and Sedition Act. His allies in Congress, the Federalists, argued that these measures were necessary in anticipation of a possible war with France to protect the country from internal spies, subversive elements, and dissent. The Federalists disapproved of immigrants, viewing them as a threat to the purity of our national character. They particularly disliked the Irish, the largest immigrant group, because they largely favored their political opponents, the Republicans, and sympathized with the French. Or as one Federalist congressman put it, there was no need to, quote, invite hordes of wild Irishmen, nor the turbulent and disorderly of all the world, to come here with a basic view to distract our tranquility, end quote. Critics of the new laws raised their voices in protest. The Republicans charged that they amounted to barefaced efforts to weaken their faction, which happened to include most Americans not of English heritage. Two leading Republicans, Thomas Jefferson and James Madison, went so far as to advise state governments to refuse to abide by the Sedition Act, resolving that it was unconstitutional. Political conflicts boiled over into everyday life. Federalists and Republicans often resided in different neighborhoods and attended different churches. Federalists, centered particularly in New England, prized their Anglo-American identity, and even after the Revolution, they retained their affinity for their mother country. Republicans saw themselves as cosmopolitan, cherishing Enlightenment ideals of liberty and equality, and they championed the French Revolution and held disdain for Britain. By 1794, partisans in urban communities were holding separate 4th of July ceremonies. Republicans read aloud the Declaration of Independence, penned by the founder of their party, Thomas Jefferson, as evidence that independence had been their own achievement, while the Federalists offered toasts to their leader, President George Washington. The Republicans viewed themselves as the party of the people. One prominent politician among them chided the Federalists for celebrating not, quote, we the people, but, quote, we the noble, chosen, privileged few, end quote. To many people at the time, the Alien and Sedition Acts bore an unsettling resemblance to the kind of government overreach that spurred them to fight a war for independence just a few decades earlier. The acts comprised 4 laws, 3 of which placed restrictions on immigrants and appeared to be a strategic attempt to shape the electorate by excluding potential voters for the opposition in order to tip the scales of power. The 4th, the Sedition Act, made it illegal to publish, quote, any false, scandalous, and malicious writing or writings against the government of the United States or either House of Congress of the United States with intent to defame or to bring them into contempt or disrepute, end quote. By denying freedom of speech and freedom of the press, it outlawed criticism of the government and deprived citizens of the opportunity to become more fully informed by hearing alternative points of view. The measures gave the president power to exert control over Americans' lives in ways removed from congressional authority and therefore less accountable to popular control. Some state governments outright refused to abide by the new federal law, intensifying divisions. And on the streets, mock violence, the burning of effigies, was swiftly transformed into the genuine article as politically motivated beatings and open brawls proliferated. In one case, on July 27, 1798, Federalists in New York marched up Broadway singing God Save the King just to antagonize the Republicans. The latter responded by singing French Revolutionary songs. Soon the singing contest gave way to violence as fighting ensued. Watching the growing chaos and divisions, Americans of all stripes worried that their experiment in self-government might not survive the decade. They feared that monarchy would reassert itself, aristocracy would replace representative government, and some states might secede from the Union, causing its demise. The early beginnings of democracy in the United States were fragile. From international trade policy to immigration policy to housing, we've got all kinds of topics. The wars between Republicans and Democrats, the Republican efforts to induce fascism in the United States. A great selection of opinions will be found over at HartmannReport.com. From Los Angeles to Columbia, South Carolina, from Birmingham, Alabama to Baltimore, universal basic income programs are chalking up proof after proof of their viability. Basically, just giving people, low-income people, poor people, somewhere between $500 and $1,500 a month, no strings attached, is lifting people out of poverty, getting them back on track, getting them into solid middle-class jobs, helping their children tremendously. This works. Now, we don't have to do UBI in the United States. We're the only developed country in the world that doesn't have a national health care program. Health expenses are whacking a lot of low-income people. We're the only developed country in the world that doesn't have free college education. Education expenses are whacking people. There's a lot we could do. We can subsidize housing. We can subsidize food. We do that with food stamps. We could expand it. There's a lot we could do to benefit from this. There's a whole report about that over at hartmanreport.com. Check it out. 35 minutes past the hour. What's on your mind today? Daniel in Atlanta. Hey, Daniel, what's up?
Hey, Tom. How you doing today? Couple quick points. I want to talk about Ukraine, but the thing you mentioned earlier with Discover and whoever that other credit card company is, Capital One, the rich keep getting richer. It is what it is.
Yeah,
right?
There you go.
1983, he talked about Reagan with the antitrust thing.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing that Reagan should have done is he should have made it so pharmaceutical companies cannot advertise on TV.
I agree.
Over 50% of our advertisements on TV are from the pharmaceutical and industrial complex.
Right, and it's illegal in pretty much every other country.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So why can't we do that? It sucks watching football with all these.
Well, we can't do that because the pharmaceutical
companies.
Because 5 Republicans on the Supreme Court legalized political bribery, the pharmaceutical companies own the GOP and a substantial handful of Democrats.
Yeah. So Ukraine, I wanted to talk to Charles, too. Charles seemed like a pretty nice guy. I'm a conservative. I'm a veteran. I do not want to send my sons and daughters to fight in any more of these forever wars. Ukraine's going to lose. It is what it is. They can't beat big bad
I don't think
Russia.
so, Daniel. Certainly they can. They can hold them off.
Well,
and I would never, ever say that a democratic country should just roll over when a dictatorship marches in, particularly the largest country in Europe. I mean, that's crazy.
I mean, Charles talked about money in Texas. All this money we're sending could go straight to our citizens in this country to help them out, to help with affordable housing, to help these social welfare programs.
You want money for affordable housing and social welfare programs? How about having your average billionaire in America who's paying 3.4% in income taxes pay their fair share? How about the average rich person in America who's only paying Social Security taxes the first $160,000 of their income pay the same as everybody else? We've got plenty of money in this country. We are the richest country in the world. We also have 1 in 5 children in America going to bed hungry at least once every year. We've got massive poverty that you don't see in other fully developed countries. And the reason why? Because of conservatives like you, Daniel, because people who are saying, oh, well, we don't need a national health care system. That's socialism. Oh, we don't need to, be taking care of old people with Social Security. That's socialism. I mean, the destruction that has been done to this country, clearly we haven't been bombed as badly as Ukraine, by Russia. You got Russia attacking Ukraine right now, and literally Putin sending troops in, emptying his prisons of rapists and sending them into villages in Ukraine and saying, rape every woman you can find. I don't care if she's 6 years old, rape them. Explicit instructions. We now have this in print. Stealing over 100,000 children out of Ukraine and taking them back to Russia and selling them into child trafficking and probably sex trades. I mean, the horrors of this. And then I get calls from conservatives going, screw it. To hell with those people. Just let them die. Are you kidding?
Tom, I have a good point. I use nationalized health care. It's called the Department of Veterans Affairs.
Right, and it's an excellent system, and it should be the model for a national system.
It's not.
Of all the systems we have in America, Daniel, when you do surveys of people who use them, whether for-profit health insurance, not-for-profit health insurance, HMOs, PPOs, and veterans services, the Veterans Administration is always rated number 1 by Americans.
Well,
you may have a complaint about it. You know, there's little anecdotes are, in my opinion, largely meaningless. But yeah, you're right. You're using socialized medicine.
Let me make this one point. It is cheaper to praise our veterans than it is to take care of them, because we have a homeless veteran issue in this country, and I help work with homeless veterans, and it's pathetic. And
I agree. And then why do Republicans fight efforts to expand care for veterans?
Hey,
why is it that Donald Trump is running around
claiming
credit for legislation that Barack Obama passed that lets veterans go to nearby services?
Just like you, Halliburton Hartman. Just like you, man. You want the military-industrial complex to...
I don't want the military-industrial complex to anything. I want to protect our allies. Daniel, I'm going to move along now, but you know, you can live to fight again another day. We've gone through, what, 4 topics? I think that's enough. Marilyn in Sarasota, Florida. Hey, Marilyn, what's on your mind today?
Hi. Gosh, I get so distracted listening.
Well, it says here you're calling about Ukraine and Phil Ittner.
Yeah, and I'm in the opposite camp of the guy you just talked to.
Most people are. There's not a lot of Americans who want to
not funding them, and I think I've been emailing my congressman, gosh, sometimes 2-3 times a day, and calling, and the senators. It doesn't do any good. I've been doing it for a long time, and I feel like it falls on deaf ears. But anyway,
it doesn't. It does do good. You just because you don't see
keep telling me that because I listen to you every day.
But keep it up. Keep it up. Keep calling.
I know you're going to say that. Yeah. I just don't believe it. Yeah. Maybe it's where I am and who I'm talking to, because I've got Rick Scott and Vern Buchanan and Marco Rubio here.
I understand.
They don't care what I think.
Well, yeah, at some level they do. I mean, I realize what an uphill battle it is, but that doesn't mean that you stop. The other thing that you can do that's even more effective than calling your 3 Republican representatives is joining the local Democratic Party and showing up every month at their meetings, pitching in, volunteering, making phone calls, signing postcards.
I've considered it. I'm just not well, so
it's
kind of hard.
I get it.
Anyway, that's not what I called because yesterday Phil Ittner had an incredible cry. Watch his thing from yesterday on YouTube. It's the 10th anniversary of the Maidan. Sorry.
It's okay. Did you say it's the 10th anniversary of your daughter?
No, the Maidan.
Oh, of Maidan. Oh, the Maidan Revolution.
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Yes.
The Orange Revolution. Is today the 10th anniversary, or is it this year?
No, the Maidan is separate from the Orange Revolution.
Oh, it is. Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
I'm not that well informed. I'm sorry.
The Maidan is where 100 people were killed.
Oh, that was during Yanukovych's reign?
Is he the one they kicked out and because he wanted to get closer to Russia?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I get the names confused.
Yeah.
Also, the best place to hear information is Ukraine Latest.
Okay.
It's a Telegraph. It's a podcast.
Mm-hmm.
They are fantastic.
Ukraine Latest. Okay. I'll check
Ukraine the latest.
I see. Okay.
And they give you so much detail about what's going on there, and all the places, and how many missiles, and which towns were struck, and the equipment that's going there. And they're Brits, and just 2 of them are former tankies, I think. And the British tanks that they sent over there, the new ones, the newest models, actually have a place in them where you can brew tea.
Yeah, I saw that story. It's very British, isn't it? Marilyn, I got to run, but
Okay.
keep up the good work. And
Thanks for taking my call.
You're welcome. Good talking to you. It's 44 minutes past the hour, almost 45 minutes past the hour. We'll be back with more of your calls in just a moment. Stay with us.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Just hours ago, Ukraine shot down their 7th Russian fighter jet in a week. They're doing good. And welcome back. Rodney in Port Arthur, Texas. Hey, Rodney, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. I'd like to ask one question, and the question is, Donald Trump is talking about NATO not paying their bills. Why hasn't anyone asked why didn't Donald Trump pay his bills to workers who worked on his buildings, who did all the work for him? Why that question wasn't asked of him? That's my question.
I have seen people who know Donald Trump say that, or heard them say, that every time he makes an accusation, it's actually a confession, that he most closely understands the very kinds of frauds that he has engaged in. And so he's behaving, NATO doesn't actually have dues, or if they do, everybody, is paying them. I'm sure that there's some administrative cost for NATO, but the 2% threshold is not a requirement, it's a recommendation that individual countries that are members of NATO spend at least 2% of their GDP on defense. Here in the United States, we spend around 5% of our GDP on defense. We're way up there. There's a bunch of NATO countries that spend 2 or more percent, mostly the large NATO countries. And then there's a bunch of them that spend less than 2%. So, but that doesn't mean that you get kicked out of NATO. There's no such requirement. I mean, if Trump really wanted them to pay, that 2%, or it's not even pay. I mean, Trump uses that word because he's thinking like a landlord, but this is not that. Anyway, I'll leave it at that. If they wanted to, they could. Lance in Hot Springs, Montana. Hey, Lance, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. I wanted to talk a little bit about the media and how they're controlling us. I'm out here in western Montana, and I had the unfortunate circumstance where I had to drive a vehicle that I couldn't plug my Bluetooth phone into and listen to commercial-free music, so I had to listen to the local country western station. And when they came in on their commercial, the Fox News comes on and they say, Comer finally has the good on Biden and he's going down, and there's no pushback. That's not all they said, but that, they just blurt all this stuff out and then go on and play another song.
Yeah.
And that's they use the money that they're getting from all this political ads being spent to the media companies to go around, buying up more local newspaper and more local radio stations. We're getting outnumbered out here.
Yeah. No, you have been for 40 years, Lance. I mean, it's been that long that the conservative radio project has been going since the mid-1980s. That was when they started it. And, when Roger Ailes was also dreaming of Fox News and trying to sell his idea to finally he got, Rupert Murdoch to go along with it in, 96, as I recall? But this has been a long time coming, this right-wing radio project. It'll be interesting to see if if Soros's investment in the second largest radio network company in the country makes any difference in that. I'm not holding my breath. It's a real problem, Lance. It's a real problem. Lance, I got to run, but thank you for the call. Thanks for sharing that story with us. That was a good one. We'll be right back. It's 49 minutes now past the hour. I'll be right back with more of your calls in 60 seconds. Stay with us. Hey, thanks so much for sharing our program and for reaching out to our stations and sponsors and letting them know that you're listening. It really means a lot to us. When I was a little kid, my grandmother had a piano, and I loved to play it. I was incompetent, but I was figuring out all kinds of stuff. And then I kind of got away from it and, went to school and things got busy and just lost track of it. Well, now there's this fascinating new study out of the University of Geneva, Switzerland, that is making me think maybe I should go back and learn the piano. What they found was that they took a group of 132 healthy older adults, retired, 62 to 78 years old. Half of them learned the piano, half of them took music classes without learning the piano. And what they found was that those who learned the piano actually had the strongest increase in their memory, in their mental competence, their mental faculties. Those who took the music classes also did well, but learning the piano was a huge step. So check it out. There's a whole long rant about this over at HartmannReport.com. Check it out. 10 minutes before the hour, picking up your calls here. Kirby in Des Moines, Iowa. Hey, Kirby, what's up?
Yeah, Tom. On this New York City civil tax fraud conviction against Trump.
Well, that's the state you're talking. Arthur Engeron. The city one is coming from Alvin Bragg.
Oh, I'm sorry. It was the tax fraud, whatever it was. He, of course, continues to play the victim.
Of course.
And, I'm being picked on, and they're out to get me, political persecution. But is it not true that, in a way, they handled him with kid gloves?
Oh, yeah.
Because could this not have been a criminal conviction?
It could have been. I'm not certain if the statute of limitations is expired on the criminal side. I mean, that would be the one fly in that ointment, but yeah, I mean, what he did, people go to prison for all the time. If you lie on I've never in my life lied on a bank application, on a loan application. I would just be afraid to do it, beyond the fact that I think I'm basically honest. But, Trump lied on every single one of his loan applications, and he lied to the tax authorities, and he lied to the insurance companies, and that's not how you do business in America, and he needs to be held to account for it, and apparently is being held to account for it.
Yeah, it is so monumental that...
Yeah, it's massive. I mean, inflating the value of your properties by threefold, or in some cases, much more than that. I mean, it's just wrong. Kirby, thank you. Thanks for the call. Peter in Seattle. Hey, Peter, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. Okay, long-time listener, first-time caller.
Well, thank you.
Now, apparently the latest thing that happened is that Biden referenced Trump's comments about losers and suckers and condemned him for it.
Right.
And what that does is, first of all, it kind of puts the spotlight back on Trump. They're talking about him. And then now, of course, the conservatives, including Trump, are just saying flatly that never occurred. And then they can just say, oh, well, that just goes to show that Biden is a liar. And
well, it was one of our generals who told, wasn't it Milley who told that story? It was one.
Yes,
it was one of the generals who was with Trump.
Official who says, huh?
It was one of the generals who was with Trump when it happened. I mean, this is a first-person story. This is not a rumor.
Yes, that's correct. But then Trump is saying he's just making stuff up, and then I know it's not just a rumor.
Well, Trump is a liar. I mean, we know that Trump is a liar.
Well, yes, of course. Well, obviously, but you see, here's my point, though, that if that's like playing Trump's game, Biden should be talking about himself and his accomplishments.
Oh, I think
and
he does.
not getting into not getting stuck on Trump's flypaper, and then they just turn it around and say he's the liar. I mean,
well, I get what you're saying. I think he can do both. I mean, a well-formed message has both, moving toward pleasure and moving away from pain. It has why I'm good and why that guy is bad. It's all inclusive. So your point is well taken, Peter. Thank you very much. Tom in Mossy Head, Florida. Hey, Tom, what's up?
Hey, Tom. Great job on debating that guy, Daniel, whoever it was. Typical, confuse him with facts.
Yeah.
Anyway, what I was going to get to is I watched a documentary the other night. Sean Penn put it out. It's called Superpower. And he did this documentary. I don't know if you heard of it or watched it before. I recommend it to everybody that's confused about what really happened over in Ukraine. He started the documentary, I think 3 days. He was over there with Zelensky. And it was like 3 days before the Russians attacked. And he'd been back over there several times, 5 or 6 times, I believe. And it's really informative on, you know, what really happened over there.
Where is this documentary available, Tom?
I'm not sure. I just happened to catch it. I actually recorded it on Showtime. But it's been out, I think it came out last year.
What's the title?
Superpower.
Superpower. Okay.
Yeah. Sean Penn. It's a really excellent, informative thing on, you know, what's really going on over there, how it occurred, really.
Right. Okay. Well, thank you for that, Tom. I'll have to check it out. Maybe we can even get Sean Penn on the program to talk about it. You know, Sean's making a note, so that would be fun.
Right.
All right, Tom, thank you very much for that. Jim in Broken Bow, Oklahoma. Hey, Jim, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. Talking about Ukraine, what really makes me mad about it is it seems like when we support a country in these wars, we tiptoe around. If we had provided them with air support, F-16s and Apache helicopters and A-10 Thunderbolts, that war would have already been over with.
I agree.
We would have destroyed Russia's junkie army, sent them back into Russia, and they'd have never thought about invading Ukraine again. But instead, we just got to keep pouring money into.
Yeah, that's the bad news. The good news is the amount of money that we're pouring in is relatively small compared to our defense budget. We're talking $60 billion out of a $1 trillion defense budget. So it's basically, you know, the money that's left in the couch. And for that, what we're getting is the destruction of the Russian military. So, you know, it's a pretty good deal. Jim, I got to run. I'm sorry, we're out of time. I look forward to future conversations with you, though. Thank you for calling. And thank you for being with us today. We'll be back tomorrow, same time, same place. In the meantime, don't forget democracy is not a spectator sport. It requires all of us, and that includes you. So get out there, get active, tag, you're it. You can do it. You really can. Show up at your local Democratic Party meeting, or Republican Party for that matter, if you want to have some real fun. Anyhow, have a great afternoon. Be good to yourself and the people around you, and we'll catch up with you tomorrow.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.
Our local newspapers are being merged, purged, shrunk.
In addition to bringing you the Thom Hartmann program here on Free Speech TV and Video Media Online, we also have a whole set of ways you can interact with us and tools you can use to spread the word about the importance of democracy and the threats to it in our republic. First, there's your daily homework. Sue Nethercutt puts together a daily email newsletter that has a link to every story I discuss on the air, so you can find my sources and you can share them with your friends. It's free and you can sign up at thomhartmann.com. Second, I publish my daily take every day over at the hartmannreport.com website. That's also free if you want the daily 5 days a week rant in your inbox. No ads either. Third, we have the podcasts. 1 hour version of our daily show that's advertising supported. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts normally. And then there's also the podcast of the entire 3 hour show with no advertisements, and that's available by subscription over at thomhartmann.com. So check them all out at thomhartmann.com and hartmannreport.com.